The story began with the heroine smelling blood. She stained the white bed with red spots like blood. Looking at the sleeping guy, she clutched the knife in her hands and could not move. It was an excerpt from the novel Bloody Vengeance. This is a fantasy novel about a scary place and brothers and a sister. The main characters are Cassian and his younger sister Astel. They were born into the family of Count V, one of the 3 most prestigious magical families in the entire empire. They were accused of treason and the entire family was destroyed. At the last moment, their parents used forbidden spells of ignorance to protect their children from certain death. But even so, they could not completely save their offspring. Thanks to the sacrifice of their parents, they managed to survive the terrible massacre, but they found themselves on the streets, without a home and any support. They were little children and didn't know what to do next. The man, seeing them, started shouting, mistaking them for beggars. He repeated more than once that they should not sit and warm themselves near someone else's house. Cassian asked to take shelter under the eaves from the snow. It was very cold and he and his sister were only in thin shirts and were almost frozen, but the man did not listen. He grabbed the boy by the shirt and ordered him to shut up and go away. Suddenly, his wife ran out into the yard and said that they were just children. They were not guilty of anything. They burst into tears from helplessness and pain, but the woman apologized and explained that her husband was not evil. They had just been going through hard times lately. As an apology, she offered them food. She seemed kind and merciful, and a smile appeared on the children's faces. But as soon as it seemed to them that there were still good people, she put a bucket of spoiled scraps in front of them with mice running over them and told them to eat and clean up. They were barely surviving, but suddenly Astel realized that she was a character in a novel. Besides, in the future, they and their brother will meet a sad end. They were reborn to live their lives again. They planned to drop the charges that were brought against their family. This was the only hope for a good life, especially since the unfortunate brother Cassian did not realize anything. But still, the terrible end could not be so easily avoided, and most likely they will still face their fate. Realizing this, the girl began to cry. The brother asked what happened. He thought she was hungry and handed her a carrot, offering her something to eat since it was left over from the stable. He added that there was no point in crying because then everyone would look down on her. They must be brave to stand up for themselves. He asked her to be patient a little longer and promised that he would return his sister to her luxurious life. The girl couldn't hold back her tears because there was no point in enduring it any longer. No matter how hard they tried, death was still waiting for them in the end. She asked what to do if everything had already been decided in advance. He didn't understand what she was talking about, but she added that perhaps all endings were predetermined by fate, and in that case it didn't matter what they did, because something bad would still happen in the end. She cried and screamed that everything was pointless, but suddenly her brother put his hand on her head and said that there was no such thing as fate, nor was there a predetermined end. After a short silence, he added that even if such a thing exists, it can be changed. Having realized this, the girl really began to have hope because suddenly she could change everything. And her brother was right, because she knew the plot of the novel she read very well. She could write her own destiny. Although the Eminence Grise was not revealed in the novel, there were clearly clues that could help find him. First of all, she needed to find out who had provided false evidence that Count Vitri had committed treason. There were 3 spies. One of them was a man and the other 2 were werewolves. When our heroine's family was killed, these people fled to another place. The place where the spies hid was the Duchy of Aeneas. It is an unusually cold duchy in the north of the empire, a land of werewolves ruled by Duke Aeneas himself. He was a beast slayer and a werewolf lord. It was in him that the secret lay. She didn't know if she could get to that place, and even if she could stay alive and find the Grey Cardinal who was never revealed in the novel. Meanwhile, the brother fell asleep. He kept repeating that he knew about the parents' innocence and promised that he would protect his sister. He worked day and night to feed himself and his little sister. His hands were covered in calluses, and every morning he gripped a stick, tightly practicing fencing. He did this for his late parents and sister. Seeing his efforts, the girl could not hold back her tears. She had to do something to change their fate. She firmly decided that she would make her way into the duchy, find and expose the Grey Cardinal. This was the only way she could change the ending for herself and her brother for the better. Many years have passed since she made this decision. Cassian has successfully joined the Knights Templar. She herself focused on studying veterinary medicine and successfully found work at the best medical center outside the duchy. But this was not enough. The duchy was too far away. People were looking out the window watching the castle when there was a knock on the door. The guy asked if she had prepared the medicines he had talked about yesterday. She asked if she should bring them now, to which he irritably replied that she shouldn't ask questions but just do it faster. The guy called her slow and stupid. He was the director and openly discriminated against her, but the heroine had to endure it. But now the moment has come when everything will change. This was the moment when she saved Duke Aeneas's life. In the original story, it was the director who helped him, and after that, the Duke considered him his savior. Because of this, he was invited to the duchy to hear his request. But now everything went differently because she was the one who made the rescue. His Majesty's expression improved slightly, although he still felt unwell. The girl was glad. Her efforts for this day were not in vain. Even if Aeneas didn't hear her, she still wanted to say that the treatment was over. She added that he should get well soon, and after that he should definitely take her to the duchy. As soon as the girl was distracted, she quickly fell asleep. Meanwhile, His Majesty woke up. Barely opening his eyes, he looked towards the young girl who had fallen asleep on the bed. When the heroine woke up, she asked who was coming. His Majesty turned around and thanked his savior, adding that he had to repay her. He extended his hand to her and told her that she needed to come to his mansion to discuss the details. The girl already thought that everything was okay, but suddenly His Majesty grabbed her hand. It turned out that he found out that during that massacre, the heroine hid using invisibility magic. No matter what, he could not allow the line of traitors to continue. Without letting her go, he declared that the girl must die. Suddenly, she woke up. It was just a dream. But it turned out to be so real that even my wrist hurt, as if it was really being squeezed by the Duke's hand. His eyes were frightening. He is a monster slayer and the ruler of the Thorianthrope lands. This is a man who terrorizes the entire continent beyond the Empire. His name and bestial origins were shrouded in mystery. The heroine had to infiltrate Anaïs's mansion. She intended to reveal the identity of the Grey Cardinal, the main enemy of her family. So she began studying therapy to save the Duke, but she was afraid of being exposed. This dream tormented her all her life. What if His Majesty finds out the truth? It seemed as if a terrible dream was about to come true. She was afraid to hear from him that she would have to die, but there was no point in trembling. You just had to do what you had to do. She was glad that His Majesty had recovered and was safe and sound. However, behind her smile there were unbearable emotions. She was very worried. My heart was constricted with fear. It seemed like it was about to burst. She was too worried, or maybe it was the aftermath of a terrible dream. And now His Majesty stood right in front of her. She ordered herself to pull herself together. After all, no matter how much effort she put in for the Duke, now she was just a person who saved his life, even if he considered her an enemy. At any cost, she had to get into his mansion. She happily told him that she was happy about his recovery. He responded coldly, remained silent for a minute, and then added that he was grateful to her. She was delighted, thinking that her dream had come true, but his gaze was strange. He looked at her not as a savior, but as an enemy. He said that she was his benefactor, and therefore he would fulfill his promise and repay her. It was exciting and scary. The girl didn't know what to do. But she saved his life, so she should be strong and not get lost. She realized that he would indeed repay her according to his deserts, and firmly stated that she would do everything in her power. She started to say that she would be happy with any reward, but suddenly remembered. She had to pretend that she didn't need anything because she hadn't helped for the sake of a reward. However, she did have a small request. Without realizing it, she sank to her knees in front of him. Her house looked too dilapidated, so she asked to discuss the matter elsewhere. He agreed. The girl was very happy because everything was going according to her plan, or at least it was supposed to be that way. But the expression on his face did not bode well. It scared the girl. He was silent for a while, and then said that there was a mansion nearby. He invited her to go there with him. She couldn't believe she had done it. Our heroine was shocked that her plan to infiltrate Duke Aeneas's mansion had worked. She smiled and said that would be nice. Duke Aeneas remained just as cold. Her words did not lose their credibility. It was a young lady. He waited for her words. Taking her hand, he carefully examined her fingers. This greatly excited the girl, but she remained silent while he examined her hand. The girl's cheeks turned red. Suddenly, she didn't understand what had happened, and it seemed to become easier to breathe. It was that same feeling after everything she had done, and now she had succeeded. She asked the Duke to wait, but she didn't understand what he had said. He was waiting for her answer. She didn't understand why this was so. The lady didn't quite understand what was going on. She was afraid to say something wrong, and he asked her if she knew who he was. She immediately replied that she did. But judging by the fact that spies were hiding in his mansion, the Duke cannot be just a gray eminence. Still, she wanted to pretend that she knew nothing. She added that she did not even guess his origin. His Majesty was very surprised by this because from her face it seemed that she knew everything. The young lady was very worried about this, but she didn't show it. He had a very strange look. His eyes looked like he was about to cry. He said that they would no longer talk about nonsense and suggested going to the castle. Ice thought for a long time, but agreed and said that she was already going with him. His Majesty has already prepared the carriage. The lady couldn't even imagine how everything had been prepared so quickly. She was surprised. His Majesty wanted to know her name, and she introduced herself. Her name was Astel. She was a commoner who worked at a medical center outside the duchy. His Majesty turned to Estelle and apologized for introducing himself so late. He introduced himself as Duke Aeneas and invited her to go to his domain. The lady was once again shocked by what she heard. She still couldn't imagine that her childhood dream and the dream from her past life were about to come true. All the emotions were visible in her eyes, fear, joy, and worries. She promised her brother Cassian the best and wanted him not to worry about her. Now she is going to the very mansion she always dreamed of, hoping to shape her destiny. The lady didn't expect everything to go so perfectly, but suddenly fate will be rewritten and a painful death will not await her. In the carriage, they were simply silent. The girl was very shy. His Majesty the Duke simply looked at the girl. She was just a commoner, but there was something special about her. Astel just wanted to disappear from the awkwardness. She didn't say a word after she got into the carriage, although she had something to say, but she got seasick. Or maybe it was the tension, but she couldn't fake it. Her breathing was ragged and her head was starting to hurt. Everything seemed incredible because His Majesty was sitting in front of her. Duke Aeneas sat by the window right next to her, his face calm. She couldn't understand how this was possible. Although the wound had already healed, he almost died, but despite everything, he remained surprisingly cool. Even in such a situation, he was ready to let a stranger into his home. Most trianthropes feel hatred and wariness towards people who have hurt them in the past, but the Duke is probably not like that. He noticed that she was looking at him intently. She was very nervous, started talking nonsense to avoid looking stupid, and explained that she knew almost nothing about him, simply using the pause. She said she was treating injuries, so she didn't even notice his face. It was so beautiful that she herself didn't realize it at first. Now she admired it. If there were other talents, his talent would certainly be in his face. It may have been an exaggeration, but it was still true. His image of him wounded and fallen to the ground was incredibly beautiful. She recognized him as soon as she saw him, but she couldn't understand why exactly the Duke was wounded. He is strangely called the God of the Night. He asked if it was true that she admired his face so much. The lady replied that she did not dare to say whether she liked his face or not. Without even realizing it, she felt a slight tremor in her heart, not just tension. His Majesty looked at her unwaveringly. Her heart was filled with pain as she clasped her hands to her chest. He asked her what was wrong with her because he felt like something was happening to her. He described her sensations, saying that she probably felt difficulty breathing and had a headache, which greatly surprised the girl. She began to worry greatly, not understanding what he was thinking. His Majesty took her hand and said that if he did so, she would feel better. After that, she really felt much better. It was true. Come to think of it, they were already holding hands. Only she didn't understand what the Duke was doing to her. The Duke was incredibly handsome and intelligent. She realized that his essence concealed many secrets. Suddenly, he handed her a lollipop and brought it right to her lips. It was a strawberry candy, and the girl felt her body relax. She thanked him. She was wary, so he couldn't offer her anything but a strawberry candy. She fell asleep, and he, laying her head on the pillow, told her to rest before they arrived. Once the lady arrives in the duchy, she will learn a surprising truth. When she passed out, she had a strange dream. She was walking on a green lawn and everything around her was calling her somewhere. When she turned around, she saw no one. But suddenly from behind the bushes she noticed a small puppy or cat. It is not clear why, but she still wanted to stroke him, and suddenly at one moment he turned into something else, because she thought that he would be soft and fluffy. While she stroked the dog's fur, which seemed thick and smooth, she was in fact touching the Duke himself. As soon as she woke up from her sleep, she was overcome with shock at the fact that she had allowed herself to do such a thing, and she immediately began to apologize to his lordship. Astle was very nervous and said that she fell asleep and she was very sorry. The butlers were shocked by what happened, but His Majesty showed no emotion. The guys were shocked that the girl allowed them to stroke her hair like a peach. Rumors quickly spread, and at that very moment all the maids learned of the news. But everyone had different rumors, so everyone heard them in their own way, and the workers exchanged distorted versions among themselves. They believed that anyone who dared to touch the head of His Majesty should be beheaded. Our heroine was worried that she had insulted the guy with such an act and felt strange, so she made such a mistake. At that moment, the servants were even more surprised because His Majesty said that he was not insulted at all. The servants were perplexed. This was the first commoner who simply touched His Majesty. They were even more surprised when Anais asked the girl to go to the doctor to check her well-being. This reaction surprised the girl herself. His Majesty walked along his corridor. The Duke was met by all his subordinates and everyone was very happy. But the owner was not interested in anything except where she was now and whether his doctor was there. He was in his office and was told to prepare everything for the Duke's arrival. The hall workers began to whisper among themselves. It seemed to them that the girl looked like a hamster. The heroine felt that everyone was staring at her. But it was logical because she made a huge mistake. She felt very awkward around the Emperor. The servants were frightened as soon as he looked at them. His gaze was cold and cruel. He was silent and then called the others to him. Even though she was wrong, it didn't matter what others said anymore because she saved Duke Anaïs's life and she was already used to being treated with arrogance. She wouldn't have been surprised even if she had heard everything they said. The doctor greeted them joyfully. He said that for many years he hadn't heard of strangers getting into His Majesty's mansion. Surprisingly, she was a life partner, but our heroine was not sure that she needed to rush into this. She asked to stay with the doctor, but asked several more times who she was to the Duke. Meanwhile, His Majesty simply stood and remained silent. Having heard what the doctor had been trying to convey to her for so long, the lady was surprised. She did not understand why she in particular, but the doctor replied that between them was the seal of life partners. Astle remembered reading about it in a book. It was a very ancient magic of the Terianthropes. It was a ritual in which the Terianthropes swore to love each other forever. It was not limited to just sharing pain. In fact, when one of them dies, the spell causes the other one to die as well. But how a seal can exist between a Terianthrope and a human being, this could not reach our heroine. All this was too confusing for the young girl because it was completely impossible. She exclaimed that it was incredible. She was very happy because they were connected by a seal, but she did not participate in any ritual. His Majesty was also very surprised. No one could understand what was happening here. The doctor adjusted his glasses and said that this was an unusual case because it was a temporary seal of unknown origin. It turns out that from the very beginning of her life, our heroine began to be associated with the Duke. The doctor explained what the temporary seal meant. First, the creation of the seal is accompanied by a slight chill, which can be fatal if not treated, so you need to hurry. Hearing this, the girl panicked. The doctor asked if she was shaking or had stomach pain. She confirmed everything. It was a death sign. After all the symptoms, he confirmed that the funeral would be in 3 days. His Majesty added that it would be in 3 days and most likely in a week. Our heroine was shocked by this because this was not in the novel. The doctor saw that the girl's expression had changed greatly, and he asked if everything was okay with her. As soon as he tried to touch her, the Duke immediately forbade him to do so. At that moment, he asked what they could do since he didn't want to die in a week either. The doctor said that they can weaken the effects of the seal, but there is only one option. Having heard that it was possible to survive, the girl decided to touch on this option and began asking which one exactly. Since this is the seal of a life partner, one needs to increase intimacy. This implies any physical contact, and this greatly frightened the young lady. After all, in the Duke's novel, she didn't like it when someone touched him. She didn't know what to do, but the Duke took action first. He took her hand and told her that she wouldn't have to do anything. She was excited, but she was ready to do anything for the sake of her life. His Majesty's expression was as unwavering as ever. At the moment when she asked what happened, she added that she felt a little ticklish. She was surprised by the Duke's determination. Simply holding hands will do for now, of course. Even from such contact with the guy, the girl blushed deeply and said that she still felt better. In her thoughts, she tried to calm herself down because she had been dreaming too much. She liked it too because the touch was much more pleasant than she thought. Their lives were in danger after all, and no matter how much he disliked being touched, they had no choice. When they met, he instinctively took her hand and didn't mind at all. Perhaps people in his circle show gratitude in this way. Meanwhile, the doctor turned to archaeology, saying that it would take a year to remove the unknown seals. His Majesty said that in that case, for 1 year, she would become his only weakness. It was very stressful because the reason she wanted to be the savior of his life was because she needed to get into the mansion. She doesn't have time to worry about seals at all. She needed to hurry to find the Grey Cardinal and the spy. She asked if the Duke was comfortable in such conditions, and he replied that he was absolutely fine. Hearing this, the girl was even more surprised. He asked why he should be uncomfortable. Still, she was in a winning situation because if something happened to her, the Duke would die too. So he promised that he would not let her die. He swore that he would not let anyone hurt her and would not allow anything to happen to her. The Duke asked to stay in the castle for the rest of the year. It's surprising that she would stay here as a human, since even the servants here are trianthropes. Most likely no people live here. Meanwhile, the Duke said that no one would object because there was only one witness. And this is the doctor, and His Majesty will make him shut up. He said that the girl would not experience any inconvenience at all. He asked to stay in the duchy, it would be safer. And so began a new stage in the life of our heroine, where she is locked up in this place for a whole year. She looked out the window. There was a beautiful evening landscape. Although this plan is different from what was originally, it is not so bad. The girl found herself a task. At least compared to working and secretly searching for information she now lives in, a mansion is engaged in an investigation, and it will be much easier. Besides, she is the Duke's only weakness, and no one in the castle except him can touch her. It was still a good offer, but very suspicious. If the Duke were the eminence grise, it would most likely be a trap, but even so, she could find a clue to how to avenge her family. If her guess is true, she will do anything. After thinking for a moment, she agreed to stay in the mansion. The Duke said that this was excellent, and now he was ready to fulfill her request. He let the doctor go. He was a little worried, but walked away. Now that no one was around, she could tell him about her request. She believed that His Majesty would keep his promise to the end. She was afraid that it would only last until the seal was broken. At any moment, she could die by his hand and no one would even know about it. Hearing the girl's request, the Duke promised that he would protect her even after the seal expired. What she heard calmed the girl down, although her heart still fluttered. As she had expected, it was the effect of the seal. He led her to the room she would be staying in. It was beautiful, and Steele was shocked by all the beauty that was there. After her family was destroyed, she had always survived on the streets in orphanages or squalid shacks, and now she had a beautiful home. If nothing had happened to her family, she would have had all this from the start. At that moment, she became very sad. The Duke saw it and asked what was wrong. If there was something that didn't suit them, they could change the room. But the lady said it was just lovely here, and she was happy with everything. In parting, His Majesty stroked Steele on the head. She asked what was wrong, but he just pretended to take her fever in case she felt unwell. She smiled and also touched His Majesty's head, saying that she wanted to check him for fever. The lady smiled and said he was fine. He blushed a little and said that was good. Meanwhile, her brother was waiting for news from his sister because he had received an incredible achievement so great that they even wrote about it in the newspapers. He didn't understand why the others hadn't shown up yet. Meanwhile, the Duke suggested that the girl rest because she was very tired, but she asked how they were going to strengthen their relationship, thinking it would be a good idea to confirm their status to get closer. They would have dinner every day, and she was curious to know his opinion. Although it sounded unexpected, she felt like she would be locked in a mansion. It would be no different from the jungle where the strongest predators mocked the weakest, but under the protection of Duke Aeneas, she was in no danger. But she could still face contempt and neglect because no one canceled the mansion's workers. The queen, if ignored, would not be a pleasant neighbor either. In that case, life would not be as sweet as she would like, but she was already used to it, so conflicts should not have arisen. If they do, it will seriously hinder the gathering of information about her enemies. If everyone sees her enjoying dinner with the Duke, they will understand that she is not an ordinary girl, and then they won't be able to ignore her anymore. If I, the Duke, am one of their enemies, she might learn some of his weaknesses during dinner. She asked him again if she could have dinner with him already, and it sounded like a good idea to him. This made our heroine very happy, and she suggested starting from this evening, but she needed to prepare a little because she could not have dinner with him like that. However, His Majesty noticed that the suit looked quite good. The lady explained that these were the clothes she wore when she worked at the medical center, and since she would be with the Duke, she had to look the part to match him. His Majesty realized that the girl cared about her appearance and decided to prepare a new outfit for her. But he still liked the look of the girl in this outfit, and he took her hand, making another compliment. After that, he said that he would take her to the dining room regardless of her appearance. And he really liked her face. It inspired confidence. Already approaching her room, she could understand why her stomach hurt. She could not believe that she had no jam. The idea was that His Majesty's subordinates would not ignore her, but it didn't work out as she expected. She felt like everyone was laughing at her because she looked bad. She still needed to take a pill for her stomach, and she asked if her luggage had arrived. She wondered how the medical center workers reacted to this as they watched the Duke's servants carry her things. At the very least, the director of the center would be very angry, and this made her happy. When she got to her room, she saw all her things. She quickly changed into her pajamas and started reading the estate manual. As she read each line of the plan, she realized that everything was going as planned. Turning the page, she moved on to the next section. Meanwhile, the maids were discussing how someone had touched the Duke's hair. They thought it was very unpleasant, and she herself was thin and small, like a twig. One of the housekeepers said that they didn't care about this information because the Duke was the one who decided everything here, and people didn't want anyone to live here anyway. Humans are creatures that start crying and giving up at the slightest difficulty. They thought it was funny to play a joke on her. All people deserve to be treated like this. They were discussing what to do when they were interrupted by someone unknown with a blue pendant around his neck. It was Miss Rudel, Duke Aeneas's headmaid. She added that their job was to maintain the mansion, not to gossip behind someone's back. But the maids were indignant because there was a man within their walls, and this lady also hated them. She simply turned away and said that it was not worth discussing because it did not matter whether she liked them or not. She added that they were just weak creatures who were not capable of anything. Meanwhile, our heroine fell asleep. One of her plans was to make friends with Rudel. The next morning, the sun woke her up. She slept soundly through the night and saw a beautiful sunrise. When she woke up, she couldn't understand where she was, but only later she remembered that she had successfully entered the mansion of Duke Aeneas. Amazingly, she found herself here unharmed, and now it was time for her to start working on her brilliant plan for revenge. But still, the soft bed won, and she wanted to sleep a little more because she had spent her whole life on a stone floor. She had the same bed as a child when everything was fine in their family. She remembered how her brother Kostya always complained that her bed was much more comfortable than his. She didn't know how her brother was, whether he was worried, whether he was overworked. She hoped that he was okay in the barracks and that he was eating well. She also didn't know if he was thinking about her, but she had no time for that now. She had to write a letter and find out how he was doing. As she carefully made her bed, she thought about everything that was happening. Since she was planning to infiltrate the Duke's mansion, she had not thought about contacting Cassian, but when he became a knight, they began exchanging letters, and the bird that carried them between her and Cassian was called Challo. It appeared because of the ancient magic that her parents used to protect them from all evil. Only people with strong magical powers could see it, and when it found her, it would knock on the window. He was about to arrive, and she needed to open the window. As soon as she approached the window to open it, Miss Rudel stopped her, saying that all the windows in the Duke's mansion had powerful magical powers to prevent intrusion from the outside. If the girl had touched the window, her hand would have been blown off by the explosion. The headmaid apologized for intervening so late and said that the girl could address her as Manager Rudel. She was the most powerful and closest manager of the Duke, according to the information accumulated over 3 years of work in the treatment center. There are 3 important forces. After the Duke, she Issa, the captain of the Night Squad, who has great power. This is the army of the 4 clans of the Second Palace, and finally the female maid. She's the one who runs the mansion. There's Mr. K. She has information about everyone who comes in and out of the mansion, so the next step is to befriend her. The senior maid began by checking Stahl's identity, so she looked at her with a magnifying glass. Our heroine was very scared because the woman was so big and scary. After what she saw, would she be able to befriend her? Standing next to the girl with a magnifying glass, the senior maid wanted to conduct an inspection. It was a simple procedure, but the girl understood that most likely, due to her behavior, the woman might suspect something. After all, her father and mother hid the true abilities and identity of Cassian and our heroine for their safety. The rest didn't know if this thing could show that they were not really those people. The woman pressed the instrument against her wrist. What she saw surprised her greatly because there was some unknown seal on the skin. But still, the test was passed. It is unclear why she did it. Most likely, she didn't suspect anything because her parents' magic is incredible. After this, the woman proceeded to lead the lady to her room. She thought that this was a great opportunity. She would try to carry out her plan and become friends with Rudolph. She was still a little afraid, but if she could find out more, it would be easier to become friends with her. The woman seemed like an impenetrable tower and was unlikely to let anyone get closer so easily. She was never mentioned in the novel. Even the therianthropes at the medical center didn't know who she was. Meanwhile, the senior maid decided to briefly explain what this room was. The woman's lecture lasted so long that our heroine was surprised by such a short version of the story. Therianthropes tend to match the characteristics of their reactions. For example, dogs are friendly towards people, dolphins are excellent swimmers. But the maid herself was so delicate and cautious that it was stressful for our heroine. Most likely, representatives of her race can intimidate the enemy simply by standing still. Listening to the woman's lecture, our heroine wondered who could have been in the place of the race: a wolf, a tiger, a lion, and other large creatures. And Stahl thought that Rudolph's manager was most likely a panther or a jaguar, but still her hand definitely resembled claws. His Majesty the Duke noticed that the girl was worried about something. He approached her more than once, but she did not respond in any way. Our heroine realized that she needed to think less about Rudolph, otherwise she would seem very strange. This calmed the Duke because he was worried that she would like everything. His Majesty also thought for a long time about what she would like. And so he didn't come up with anything. He wanted to listen to the girl's story to get to know her better. He was interested in what food she liked and what ladies she was friends with. Hearing such a question, our heroine fell into a stupor because she did not know what to answer. She was scared because Anais was trying to find out her true identity. Even though she had passed the test with the magical device, she was still afraid of showing weakness and falling under the Duke's attack. Still, the girl expected such a test because a magic tool is only the easiest. Thank God she saved many answers for different life situations. She told a sad story about how she lost her parents and wandered the streets, then ended up in an orphanage and spent her childhood there. Later, she entered medical school. She only had friends in the orphanage. Their names were Anne and Gilbert, but now she doesn't communicate with them. She lost contact a long time ago. There is only one person she still keeps in touch with. Perhaps the Duke has even heard of him. Cassian Gray, a commoner who was recently knighted. Despite all his brother's popularity, the Duke was hearing about her for the first time. The girl said that recently there was even an article in the newspaper about him being a hero of the Empire. She decided to say that Cassian was not her brother but her best friend because they both came from an orphanage. Our heroine thought she had told everything correctly, but in fact, the Duke had something in mind. It seemed he had begun to consider him his competitor. He had already decided that someday he would have to visit the guy. To break the awkward silence, Stahl asked if Anais had any friends. He answered briefly, "Only one." This greatly surprised the lady. Looking at the Duke's face, she saw pain there. He promised to bring this friend back no matter what. She didn't understand who he was talking about. Her thoughts stopped when she felt a strong pain in her heart. This pain was the sorrow that weighed so heavily on the Duke himself. No one could feel it except her. Our heroine understood that the guy's fate was not easy. He took her hand, but it didn't help the pain much. After that, the guy kissed her. Surprisingly, everything became much more pleasant. The pain instantly passed as if the kiss had been from an angel. She immediately felt much better, as did the Duke. Meanwhile, the lady's heart began to beat strongly from excitement. She was very surprised how the guy could be so calm and not even flinch. She asked what animal the Duke had and thought it was a fox. He asked if the fox looked like a human. Surprisingly, his race was not revealed in the novel, nor was the race of the head maid. The lady suggested that it was because he did all these things very naturally, and most likely it was a fox's character trait. What he heard surprised the Duke. Most likely people think that all actions correspond to their animals. He said that most trianthropes are born with the characteristics of the corresponding animals, but occasionally there are those who are the opposite of their animal nature. This shocked the heroine. Even if a trianthrope has fox features, it is not always so. He said that if they get closer, he will understand what species he belongs to. The day had been very difficult. Astel thought about Anaïs's words. She could not forget that passionate kiss on the hand that the Duke had given her. Within a minute, she forced herself to return to normal thoughts and stop dreaming about nonsense. After all, a new clue has emerged, namely that some trianthropes may not correspond to their nature. Perhaps Rudol is one of those. Suddenly the head maid came to Miss Astel. She asked if she could come in. The lady allowed her, but what she saw greatly surprised the woman. The others were no less surprised. I didn't expect the head maid to come to her. The woman has a problem. She is not satisfied with the quality of work of the other maids. No matter how good they are, they still don't meet her standards. She didn't know if it was possible to find someone who could clean and tidy as well as she liked. Rudol said that when she thinks about it, she gets so nervous that her head starts to hurt. It had become so familiar that it had become almost a constant pain, but what she saw simply stunned her. Her emotions were vivid and unexpected. She found a place where everything was in its place, perfectly tidied up, and next to this splendor stood our heroine, impeccably dressed and looking like a real lady. Astel greeted the woman with sincere respect, trying not to show surprise but feeling a slight uneasiness from the fact that everything here seemed too perfect. For the first time in her life, she was so impressed by this place and the people. Everything looked so carefully constructed that there was no doubt that a real professional was working here. Everything went according to the heroine's preconceived plan because this was exactly the reaction she expected from the senior maid. Everything had to be perfect as well as her preparation. When she first met Rudol, she felt her intuition instantly tell her what race she belonged to. It was like a sharp feeling that could not be ignored. However, her animal nature, although obvious, did not match her character at all. At first, she thought that there was a mistake somewhere, but the Duke's words helped to understand. Usually, anthropes have the same traits as their animal counterparts, but sometimes exceptions occur, and then it becomes clear that you are not quite a typical case. Apparently, the senior maid could be just such an exception, which explained her oddities. It was a confirmation of her unusual nature. Her behavior and traits were completely at odds with what was usually characteristic of her race. This became an important clue for the heroine, and she began to look for an explanation that would be more logical. Most likely, Rudol was not just a sloth, but used its qualities for protection. This slowness and sluggishness may have served as protection from external threats and predators. Apparently, the girl became more clean to hide her true origin and not to reveal her roots. This could be her way of protecting herself from the outside world. The woman, noticing her unusual habit, decided to ask if she could ask a question. She wondered how the girl managed to achieve such perfect cleanliness and could not understand how she managed to keep everything in perfect order. The lady replied that it was all about her hard work and love for cleanliness. She explained that she had done the cleaning yesterday. As soon as she woke up early, she immediately started cleaning. She cleaned all day. Trying to please cleanliness for her is not just a habit, but a passion. This surprised the woman. The woman asked how she could be so disciplined in keeping order. The lady said that in the orphanage she was punished if she did not clean well. This habit stayed with her all her life and influenced her behavior as an adult. Perhaps it was also influenced by the fact that she was often called a dirty beggar on the street. This remark surprised the woman because she could not imagine that such a clean girl had ever faced such accusations. The atmosphere began to open up in a different direction, and the woman noticed that the lady loved cleaning as much as she did. She began to think that they could establish a good understanding because their interests coincided. She even thought that they could take walks in the fresh air, do other pleasant things to get to know each other better and become friends. These thoughts made the senior maid blush deeply, feeling awkward. At this point, Miss Rudell intervened, reminding her that the girl was His Highness's fiancée, so she did not need to do the cleaning. This added clarity to the situation, and the head maid realized that she had a role to play. It seemed that the girl's entire cleaning plan had not worked out as she had expected. She had hoped that her efforts would lead to something more, but now it was obvious that her efforts had been in vain. However, despite this, there was no question of her relaxing. Everything in the room was perfectly clean, and she tried with all her heart to please Miss Rudell, not knowing what awaited her next. Eventually, the woman turned around and explained that they couldn't just walk around the area, but was willing to help with cleaning and other such chores. She added that if the heroine needs anything, she should not be shy and should definitely call her. The woman promised to help as soon as any questions arise. Even though the woman was about to leave again this time, the heroine was not as scared as yesterday. The atmosphere became much friendlier, and the senior cleaner seemed less threatening. The heroine had a feeling that perhaps they could improve their relationship and get along with each other. She became more and more accustomed to the new conditions and to the woman herself. At that moment, before Rudell even had time to go out, the heroine asked if she could open the window to check the room. She felt the need to make sure it was safe. The woman said that while His Majesty was in the mansion, there was no need to worry. However, if she noticed someone unfamiliar, she should immediately press the magic button to contact. When the heroine opened the window, she immediately noticed her favorite bird, Chala. This bird was her link with her brother, delivering his letters which brought her peace. She immediately handed the bird her leaf and asked it to deliver it to her brother Chala. As always, looked incredibly cute, and the heroine was sure that the message would arrive on time. The bird gracefully disappeared, and the heroine watched its quick departure with hope, hoping that the letter would reach her brother as soon as possible. At this time, one of the influential people received a decree from the emperor, which stated that in order to fight evil and prepare for war, His Majesty would send the Knights of the Rose to help. Initially, it was necessary to gather an army of volunteer knights. Once the selection is completed, the list of participants will be announced and the personal data of each will be collected separately for the further process. The Duke could not concentrate on what was happening around him. He was absorbed in his thoughts, completely oblivious to what was happening in the room. All his attention was riveted to the window. The Duke's gaze fell on something that immediately caught his attention. He noticed a messenger bird flying past and a package was attached to its leg. The Duke watched the bird closely until it landed. He realized that it was a postal bird delivering a letter. At that moment, his thoughts were filled with curiosity. What was there? Although he was worried about the contents of the letter, his concerns were relatively minor. In the end, he decided that the situation with the girl's friend was not a threat. The assistant standing next to him could not understand what was being said. He was confused, but the Duke just waved him off, saying that it was just thinking out loud, and let him go, giving him the opportunity to leave. At this time, Cassian, after thinking for a while, came to a completely unexpected conclusion. He swore that he would take part in the battle with the monsters despite all the difficulties. His friends were stunned by this statement. They were all sure that he would not survive this battle. It seemed that his decision was doomed to failure, and nothing good would come of it. Cassian, although recognized as a hero of the Empire, could hardly hope for success. His past and position did not give grounds for optimism, and no one believed in his chances. Moreover, he was not only poor, but also an orphan, which greatly complicated his situation. The image of his future was very gloomy, and few believed that he would survive. The boys who watched Cassian were sure that his sacrifice would not bring any benefit. They thought that he would be quickly forgotten and his death would not leave a trace in history. Deep down they hoped that he would at least manage to die quickly and without too much suffering. Perhaps they would erect some kind of monument in his honor, but even that seemed doubtful. However, Cassian, thanking them for their concern, said that he really didn't care how it all ended. He was ready to continue his journey despite all the difficulties and was not interested in the fate predicted for him by others. After the young man had expressed his opinion, he said that he would make sure that his friend would be in a situation where no family would accept him, not even as a pet. If the father of a noble boy found out that some commoner had hit his son, he would immediately disown him. No lady would look at such a man because there is no greater humiliation than to be in such a position. It was the ultimate fall in the eyes of society, and the guy knew it. The boy intended to break all of his opponent's limbs, hoping that this would force him to mend his ways, but this time the older knight intervened and stopped him from continuing this cruel threat. His name was Ropa Shielant, and he was the captain of the Red Rose Knights. Despite his strict reputation, he was one of those who could handle any situation on and off the battlefield. Captain Ropa stopped Cassian, ordering him to lower his sword. He then asked what he was going to do with the young man, as his actions were clearly unnecessary and unjustified in the situation. Meanwhile, Cassian once again passed his sword near the boy's throat, making it clear that he had survived only due to the captain's intervention. After that, his opponent quickly ran away, and the danger passed. Cassian easily replied that nothing terrible had happened. He added that they were simply strengthening their friendship and thus teaching each other important lessons. However, the captain was extremely irritated. He was not stupid, and he saw perfectly well that the guys were not friends at all. He could not understand why Cassian was so hot-tempered because he promised to be more restrained in his actions. During the conversation, the captain also couldn't help but ask about the strange request to participate in the battle with monsters. He was surprised that Cassian showed such initiative and wanted to understand what was behind this decision. Particularly odd was the reason given in the application. It said it would be a lot of fun, and the goal was to defeat all the monsters. It seemed crazy, but Cassian didn't share that view. The older knight, unable to comprehend what was happening, slapped himself across the face. He asked Cassian to stop joking and listen. He knew his abilities better than anyone, and he was sure that this battle would be much more difficult. This magical creature has powers that are very different from those of humans. Its abilities are beyond normal understanding, and it has a special influence on what is happening. Sure, they'll have to fight other people, but they've all experienced the loss of loved ones to magical beasts. That pain makes them fight with an incredible amount of rage and determination. Each of them goes to war not for glory or power, but to avenge their loved ones. Everyone risks their lives because they cannot forget what they have lost. He asked the boy again if he understood the gravity of his decision. The boy replied that he was fully aware of the situation because he himself had lost his parents and was now determined. He decides to go north because a few days ago he received a letter. Some servants who worked for the family of Count Veitra have fled there, and this gives him a reason to move in the same direction. However, the real reason he is heading north is hidden. It is his sister. He is willing to risk his life for her, and only she drives his decision to go on a dangerous journey. He intends to head north immediately to retrieve his sister. Although he is a good man, he still remains in the Duke's mansion, not wanting to rush and risk too much. He told the captain that he was heading north to ensure his sister's safety and to find ways to take revenge. Readiness to defeat any enemy became his main goal. He asked the elder if this was enough of a reason to set out on a journey. The elder was silent, not knowing what to answer because it was too personal and important for the boy. The captain realized that the boy would not listen to his advice. He only asked him to be careful, knowing how difficult it would be to stop his determination. And although the captain said not to worry, he was not really worried about the boy. His concern was about something completely different: Duke Aeneas, who was drawn into these events. The boy wondered what Duke Aeneas was really like. He wanted to know what others thought of him and what he was like as a person. He replied that when Aeneas first appeared on the battlefield, people immediately began calling him the devil. There were rumors that he tore enemies apart with his bare hands, and that should be taken into account. Although no one could confirm these rumors, our hero began to think that he might be the first to witness such horrors. It seemed that the Duke was crazy. The captain said that rumors were often exaggerated, but he believed that they were not without foundation. After all, the captain would not lie. The girl's brother, hearing this, was sure that his sister was living with a psychopath. The Northern Territory was almost a separate state with a non-aggression pact with the kingdom. It was a neutral zone, but that didn't mean it didn't have its own rules. Even knights sent by the emperor had to have a special pass to get to the north. The commander asked with interest how determined the boy was, because he had heard a lot of new things about the Duke. However, despite all his fears, the boy became even more determined. He felt that he was ready to go to the north immediately to sort out the situation and help his sister. He made a mental promise to himself to get to his sister as soon as possible. His heart beat faster when he thought about her need for his presence. Although he didn't know all the details yet, he prayed to heaven that his sister would remain safe until he arrived. The lingering smell of blood always hung in the mansion of Duke Annius. Only now Astel realized that all this was not accidental. Bloody revenge and the tangled events of the past engulfed her. It was in this castle that the spies who destroyed the Vetri family operated. It was also here that those who once tried to take the little girl and her brother, everything was connected. After a nightmare that shook her, the girl woke up, but her first impression was strange. In the darkness, she saw a hand reaching out to her and her heart skipped a beat. As soon as Estelle came to her senses, she was immediately frightened. In front of her stood two maids who suddenly appeared nearby. Their appearance was unexpected and slightly alarming for her. The girls introduced themselves. One of them, in a soft and calm tone, said her name was Jenny. The second, a little more assertive, called herself Sally. Both seemed kind. The maids began to apologize for their sudden appearance. They did not want to scare Astel, but it happened. Suddenly, they burst into her room without warning. Having confessed their worries, the girls expressed concern. Astel did not open the door when they knocked. This made them wary. They did not know what could have happened. Jenny asked if everything was okay. Astel replied that everything was fine. She was only worried that the nightmare continued to haunt her even after she woke up. She calmed down. Jenny offered to pour her some warm tea. She thought it would help her calm down. Sally decided to bring water to wipe away the cold sweat left by the night's worries. Before she could even refuse, Astel saw the maids quickly bring tea and water. It was as if they had long known what she needed. Everything was somehow different from her nightmare. It was calm here. The girl thanked Jenny and Sally sincerely. They smiled in response, happily accepting her gratitude. They were happy to meet Astel. These girls sincerely hoped that she would take care of them as much as they would take care of her. This is the beginning of their trusting relationship. From that moment on, Astel noticed that the animals attached to the two girls were retrievers. She confidently identified their breed by their behavior and character, but with Rudel, everything was more complicated. She was now the black sheep of the house. Astel knew she needed to get closer to the Trianthrope and those around her to avoid potential enemies among the servants. However, at least the fact that Jenny and Sally were friendly towards her was good news for Astel. She knew that it would help her improve the relationships in the house. It was time to show off her talents. Astel decided to start by preparing some strange flasks, which hid an unusual mixture incomprehensible to everyone. The housekeepers didn't understand what it was at first, but the lady explained that it was a gift for waking her up the night before. It was an elixir that she had prepared herself. The girls didn't understand what was going on and looked puzzled, but Astel confidently said that she knew exactly what they needed and had prepared exactly what they liked. A minute later, Jenny and Sally both screamed in unison, noticing what Astel had said. Heroine confidently declared that she knew what they liked and had prepared the perfect gift. The girls were delighted with the gift. They thanked Astel for her care, truly appreciating her attention and approach to them. The elixir really impressed them. The elixir was definitely helping Jenny and Sally. Astel thought it would strengthen their bond and help them get closer, as she hoped it would give her an advantage. But then the other side of the coin appeared. Miss Rudy, the head housekeeper, turned to Astel, asking what drug all the servants were talking about. Although the relationship with Rudel had improved a little, Astel still felt some fear. She explained that these potions worked well and she did not add anything extra to them. Other housekeepers also began to confirm that the elixir really works. They began to feel better and less tired, which was good news. However, Miss Rudy remained wary. She reminded them that the girls were still too young and that they had to be careful with experiments like this potion. Astel decided to take advantage of the moment and ask the senior housekeeper if everything was okay with her, if there was any pain or discomfort after using the elixir. She wondered if the reason for her condition might be a headache, chronic fatigue, or anxiety, since she had worked a lot without giving herself rest. The woman was greatly surprised when the lady, having learned of her symptoms, immediately named them and confirmed that all this could be true. The Duchess offered medicine without hesitation. She spoke with a sincere expression on her face, convincing that these medications would certainly help improve her well-being and get rid of unpleasant symptoms. She handed the woman a bottle of the drug, adding that all the ingredients had been pre-checked by a doctor in the mansion's medical office to rule out any possible dangers. Despite this, the Duchess assured that the potion would only bring benefits, and there was no need to worry about possible side effects as it was safe. When the effect of the medicine was confirmed, she asked to be informed as it would be interesting to know how it affected the woman. Rudy was surprised by this behavior and could not understand what could have prompted the lady to do this. It was strange, especially considering her usually reserved behavior. Meanwhile, Sally and Jenny were worried about their mistress apologizing for their excitement and deciding that they would not brag anymore so as not to upset her. However, the lady was not angry with them. She calmly said that it was her own fault that she did not know all the rules that are important in the house and promised to improve. Sally replied with a smile that the elixir that the lady had given them was indeed working surprisingly well, and they were feeling much better than before. The Duchess had long noticed that Sally always looked tired and Jenny complained of joint pain. When they took the potion, they felt not only tired, but also painful. The girls said that in reality, access to the medical office inside the mansion is extremely difficult for most of them. There are many patients and few doctors, which creates problems. The war left behind many wounded soldiers with various complications. Their number required enormous efforts and help was not provided to all those in need. Because of this, ordinary workers with arthritis or headaches face difficulties in getting to the doctor. They are forced to simply endure because they cannot get the help they need. The workers are grateful to the girl for her sincere care. She tries to help despite all the difficulties, and her support becomes important for many in everyday life. Until recently, death due to injury or disease was considered natural selection. Tyranthropes only recently began to develop medicine in an attempt to improve living conditions. The treatment center looked bad from the outside, and the situation inside was the same. The heroine tried to get into the Duke's mansion to get closer to the Therianthropes, but events and spies interfered with her. The lady promised that if any health problems arise, if there is pain, or if medical assistance is required, then every employee of the house can contact her without fear. At that moment, the lady realized that the one she needed was hiding in the treatment center. However, her plans were ruined by the intervention of the Duke himself, who unexpectedly intervened. The Duke, noticing her intentions, said briefly that this would not work. His words sounded firm and decisive, as if everything had already been decided in advance. He added that the lady should not overdo it because her body may be subjected to excessive stress, which will lead to unpleasant consequences that she will not be able to cope with. When the girl tried to object, he took her hand, but this only added to her anxiety. She couldn't help but feel her body reacting to his touch. The Duke asked to pay attention to her condition. Today, she did almost nothing but already feels hot. This worried him, and he decided to intervene despite her stubbornness. The girl was confused again, worried about the Duke taking her hand again. It was so unexpected that she almost lost her composure at that moment. But in a moment, she pulled herself together, because at that moment there was a spy in the mansion's treatment center. This person had been exposed in the bloody massacre, and she knew that he had to be found. The spy, whose name was Sam, was the key to the mystery. To get to him, the lady had to find important clues, and for this, she had to work at the medical center. She began to assure the Duke of her competence and ability to help. She asked him to look at the document she had brought, trying to prove her determination and ability. The Duke was very surprised when he saw the document that the lady handed him. His face expressed bewilderment. He did not expect this from her, and this made him think. She told him that she had collected a lot of useful information that could be extremely useful, and asked him to look at it all. She was sure that this data would help in a difficult situation. In fact, she had been preparing all night to be ready for the Duke's possible refusal. She had been working until the morning to not miss anything and to think through all the possible solutions. Anais Sirius began to carefully reread the documents. They concerned therapy for therianthropes, secrets of health and ways to effectively treat with minimal effort. The girl waited patiently for His Majesty's answer with a smile on her face. She hoped that all her work and preparation would not be in vain, and that the Duke would appreciate her efforts. As it turned out, the situation at the treatment center was as bad as Jenny and Sally had described. It was full of problems, and the conditions left much to be desired. There was only one medical building in the center, and only a few doctors, while the number of nights requiring treatment numbered in the thousands. In her free time, she studied herbalism, hoping to find a solution. She often thought about her life in the orphanage. When other children were sleeping, she read books, studied old methods, and tried to learn everything that could be useful in the future. While working at the hospital, she mixed various ingredients. The result was not ideal. The tincture was a little cloudy, so she decided to add sage, hoping to improve the composition. Despite being tired from work, she continued her studies, often overloading herself. Because of this, she began to have problems. Her nose often bled, and she was worried that her health might suffer. She was very worried and asked how His Highness reacted to such problems. The girl did not know what to do and sought comfort in the answer, hoping for his understanding and support. She was sure that when he saw the results of the work, he would not be able to refuse. Everything that was stated in the documents should have convinced him to make the decision she was waiting for. She hoped it was enough, although frankly she knew that the data presented was only the beginning. She couldn't predict his reaction exactly, but she still had faith. The document also detailed how to neutralize monster poison methods to treat post-traumatic stress disorder in knights and other important aspects. He read it all carefully but remained silent. He was surprised because she had put a lot of work into this report. She thought it was not enough, but in fact, everything had been carefully worked out, and now her words depended on his decision. Meanwhile, the girl could barely contain her emotions. Deep down, she was sure that the data she presented was the perfect strategy that would help everyone she wanted to support. Realizing that the mansion was short of doctors, she sincerely wanted to help the knights, especially those suffering from injuries. Rumors about the situation made her feel like this was her chance to do something important. His Majesty was very surprised when he heard the girl's words. He did not expect such determination and willingness to help. This caused him a mixture of surprise and thoughts about what to do next. Asteria added that she really wanted to help. Her voice was full of determination, and her gaze was persistent. For her, this was not just a wish, but a real need. The Duke, meanwhile, began to recall his childhood filled with failures and humiliations. He was always told that he was worthless, that he was a loser, and in the end he was fired. Among all this obscurantism, there was only one bright moment. She, the heroine of his thoughts. It was her that he remembered when he was surrounded only by negativity. Her presence seemed to save him from all troubles. Astel fell silent for a moment, deep in thought. His gaze became thoughtful, and his fingers lightly tapped the table, as if helping to organize his thoughts. But he didn't think long. After weighing all the pros and cons, he made his verdict. The girl must prove her competence by curing one patient in 1 hour. The lady understood that this would not be enough, but even a small opportunity to get into the medical center seemed to her an important step. The main thing was to gain a foothold there at any cost. Despite the tough conditions, the girl accepted the challenge. Without further ado, she turned around and headed to the treatment center, determined to show off her skills. She was about to leave when she suddenly stopped, remembering one important detail. Her thoughtful gaze lingered on the Duke, and the right question flashed in her head. She decided to ask him about one of the doctors at the center whose name was Sam. The question came almost by accident, but another thought was brewing inside her. The Duke thought that the girl was interested in this doctor because he helped the Edward family. It was for this reason that he went to the north, devoting himself to research. The heroine did not deny it, but in fact she was concerned with something else. She wanted to find out how best to destroy this man. This was her real goal. However, she added out loud that she would like to know how therianthropes are treated in the north, how different creatures adapt. The Duke, looking at the report, remembered something. Without wasting any time, they headed together to the medical room. They had much to discuss, and each of them was focused on their own thoughts. Stopping in front of the girl, the Duke suddenly said with a serious face that he needed help. He said that he was sick and sincerely asked her to cure him. These words surprised the girl so much that she was speechless for a moment. She did not understand what disease they were talking about. Astel was about to go in search of Sam, but suddenly her plans had to be changed. Duke Aeneas had something in mind, and although she didn't understand what it was, her intuition told her that it was important. At the same time, the elixirs were delivered to the palace to check the ingredients. However, due to the concerns that arose, no one could do this right away, so the vials were temporarily left unattended. When they finally got around to testing it, they were surprised to notice that the elixir intended for the trianthropes smelled human. This raised questions, and it was decided to conduct further analysis. However, since Sam was human, this smell could not harm him. It was logical to assume that it would not pose a danger to other people, but the fact remained strange. Sam himself did not see a problem with this and agreed to help without hesitation. He confidently stated that he could be relied upon without asking unnecessary questions. The other colleagues were grateful to him for his willingness to participate in the inspection. Having thanked him, they went their separate ways, each to their own business, leaving him alone. But in reality, Sam despised those around him, considering them animals. He was surprised that the elixir smelled like a person because it meant that something had gone wrong. He immediately guessed that it was connected with the girl who was rumored. Most likely it was she who saved Duke Aeneas. The thought of her irritated him, and he already knew what he would do. The others also felt that something had changed, but they could not yet understand what exactly the problem was. Duke Aeneas was silent, not saying a word. His gaze was impenetrable, and no one could guess what he was thinking at that moment. They just stood there looking at each other in complete silence. The air between them was tense, as if invisible threads connected their gazes. At some point, Astel felt in her heart that the Duke really didn't care. This guess pricked her, but there was no doubt. However, contrary to her feelings, he calmly said that he was only feeling a little pain, as if wanting to reassure her. It was strange. Astel felt fine, but suddenly the pain appeared in the Duke, and there was simply no other explanation except for the connection between them. When he took her hand, she felt embarrassed again. Her heart started beating faster, and she didn't know what to do with this feeling. The lady, slightly worried, asked how the Duke was feeling. She noticed that he looked better, but she wanted to hear it from him. Perhaps he was feeling better already. The Duke looked at her thoughtfully and replied that he himself did not know. He promised to check his condition right now. However, the girl did not understand what exactly he meant. She tried to make sense of the situation, confused. What else should she do? Was she missing something? But there was no answer, and her thoughts only became more confused. He suddenly took her hands more firmly, not letting go. His touch was confident, warm, as if he was trying to convey something important through it. The next moment, he slowly leaned down and touched her lips with his. It was an unexpected but soft kiss that took her breath away. Then he calmly invited her to kiss his hand. His gaze was searching, as if he wanted to test her reaction, but he did not rush her, giving her time to process the moment. But before she could do so, he suddenly smiled and said that he was feeling much better now, so she didn't have to make any more efforts. The lady froze in surprise, not understanding what had just happened. It was all too fast, too unexpected, and she didn't know how to react now. Her thoughts were confused. Emotions washed over her like a wave. Excitement, confusion, slight fear. Everything was mixed up in her head, not allowing her to think clearly. Astel finally spoke, chiding him that he could have told her about it earlier, then she would have helped faster. Without explaining anything else, she turned around and hurried to the infirmary. In reality, she just needed to get out of his sight. Her heart was beating too fast, and she needed time to compose herself. As soon as her fingers touched his hand, her heart began to pound wildly. She expected to feel the familiar burning sensation from the seal, but nothing happened. This fact confused her. Duke Aeneas's assistant entered his office holding a thick folder of documents. These were the personal files of the members of the Knights of the Red Rose, necessary for issuing passes. When she looked up and met the Duke's gaze, her breath caught in her throat. He looked simply dazzling. Refined features, noble posture, a sparkle in his eyes. Realizing that her embarrassment was becoming too obvious, the girl hastily muttered that she would come back later, and slamming the door, hurried away, feeling her cheeks flush. However, in her haste, several sheets of paper slipped out of her folder and scattered across the floor. She did not notice this, and the documents remained lying in front of the Duke's desk. Anais glanced briefly at the fallen papers, but then narrowed his eyes when he spotted a familiar name. Curiosity got the better of him, and he bent down to pick up one of the sheets. There was a page on the floor that mentioned Cassian Grey, a member of the Knights of the Red Rose. He was the one the girl had spoken of. He remembered hearing about this man. Cassian was indeed a famous figure. His name had appeared in various reports, and his reputation was quite ambiguous. This discovery aroused the Duke's interest. The assistant froze, seeing a rare sight. A barely noticeable smile flashed across his lordship's face. She did not remember ever seeing him like this. Anais, without showing any particular emotion, handed the papers to the girl and calmly informed her that she had dropped them. There was no reproach in his voice, only a slight shadow of mockery. He immediately confirmed the document, and the lady thanked him with relief. Her voice sounded sincere because the captain of the knights would be pleased to know that the matter had been resolved so quickly. The king studied the papers in front of him, running his finger along the lines. When his gaze fell on one of the names, he raised an eyebrow slightly and, turning to his assistant, asked about it. The woman immediately replied that this man was known in the kingdom for his charm and ability to turn the heads of many ladies. In addition, one cannot help but note his attractive appearance. The assistant's words made the king think, if even the Duke expressed a desire to see this young man, then there really was something special about him. A few days later, Astel received a letter. After reading it, she learned that her brother was going north, which was unexpected. In the book, this moment happened much later. She wondered what that meant. Perhaps she would soon have the opportunity to meet Cassian, which left her with mixed feelings. In the morning, as soon as she woke up, the maids joyfully entered the room. Their faces were shining with happiness, and they greeted their mistress with enthusiasm. Astel responded with the same warm smile, and slowly sipping her tea, listened to their chatter. Their sincere attention raised her spirits a little. One of the maids, lowering her voice, shared the news. Today, Astel will go to the treatment center. Moreover, the Duke himself prepared a special medical suit for her. When they handed her the clothes, Astel looked at the girls with gratitude. However, there was a letter lying on the folded cloth which surprised her. In the letter, the Duke asked her not to overexert herself and to find time to rest. He also stressed that if any problems arose, she should inform him immediately. As she read the lines, her heart began to beat a little faster. Where did this anxiety come from? Or was it something else? She didn't want to figure it out, but the feelings spoke for themselves. She was determined to thank him for his concern. Taking a deep breath, Astel headed to her office to get to work. At the treatment center, the staff were busy with casual conversations discussing everyday matters. The atmosphere in the room was relaxed and familiar. As soon as she entered the hall, their conversations died down. The girl greeted everyone confidently, and her appearance immediately attracted the attention of those present. Estelle introduced herself in a calm voice, saying that she would be working at the medical center from today on. She spoke confidently, but there was something else hidden in her eyes. The boys looked at each other, not knowing what to do with this information. They didn't ask any unnecessary questions, but a tense silence hung in the air. In fact, her real purpose was something completely different. She wasn't there for work at all. Her mission was to track down and capture Sam. At this time, His Majesty gathered his subordinates for an important conversation. The atmosphere in the hall was serious. No one dared to be distracted because critical issues were to be discussed. He was not just having a conversation, but also signing important documents at the same time. However, his thoughts kept slipping away, somewhere occupying him more than the matters being discussed. According to the investigation of his loyal assistant, nothing suspicious has been noticed in the area. About 100 have been thoroughly checked, and fortunately, there is not a single potential enemy among them. To the surprise of everyone who lived in the mansion, Estelle was perceived as an incredibly kind and caring person. She quickly gained the respect and sympathy of those around her. However, he could not understand what connected this girl with Cassian. It remained a mystery to him, and the more he thought about it, the more uneasy he became. The Duke was increasingly worried that Cassian Grey might take advantage of her kindness. Someone as sweet and compassionate as Estelle was an easy target for manipulation. His thoughts began to carry him too far away. He even imagined how it would be better to buy an island and live there far away from everyone. But Cassian's sudden smile brought him back to reality. This made him incredibly angry. Perhaps Cassian smiled simply because he was thinking about money. This irritated him even more, but he could still contain his emotions. He continued to stare at the knight, who simply remembered how round his sister's cheeks were. They resembled a hamster's cheeks, and it made him suddenly smile. The captain reported that the emperor had given his official consent to the war against the monsters. This was an important step that required immediate discussion and preparation. The Duke firmly stated that the ideal time for this was the end of next spring. Before that moment, careful preparations had to be made so as not to leave any chances for failure. The Duke noted that the mansion was obliged to provide food not only for its lands but also for thousands of knights, infantry and cavalrymen. This was a huge burden that required careful preparation. In response, His Majesty suggested using letters and magic for communication, especially when important matters needed to be agreed upon. This decision surprised the captain, who had not expected such practicality. Cassian had heard many good things about His Majesty's tactical genius and was beginning to understand why everything was so well organized. He admired the man but suddenly noticed that he did not notice him. As the Duke prepared to leave, his path was blocked by the head of the family, Vazio Kelter. He politely interrupted his walk to ask an important question that was clearly bothering him. Kelter said he had heard that the Duke had taken a girl named Astel under his wing. He asked if this was true and what her role was in the matter. Faced with a choice, the Duke explained that Astel had once done a favor for his family. As a token of gratitude, he had decided to allow the Jaguar line to support her. It was his decision. Hearing this, Astel's brother became very worried. It was difficult for him to understand what his sister was really doing. It was strange that the proud Jaguars supported a commoner. Unexpectedly, the Duke rejected the Jaguar clan's request, stating that he was the first person whose life Astel had saved. This statement surprised everyone, but he was confident in his decision. No matter if Astel saved another life or helped someone else, she would always be under His Majesty's protection. It was a promise he kept. The Duke spoke his words to the full hall among the various representatives. He hoped that his expression was clear and understandable to all, and that no one would understand it differently. Crutch couldn't understand why Aeneas had behaved so selfishly, and this made him even more worried about his little sister. He was beside himself with worry. Anxiety overcame him. His nerves were on edge, and he even put a stone in his pocket trying to calm down, but this gesture only increased his internal tension and concern for Astel. The stone turned out to be an expensive shadow projection artifact, but Astel couldn't understand where her brother got the money to buy something like that. It was unexpected and mysterious. The cello was a valuable and fast messenger bird. It was thanks to her that they maintained contact. She could be used to send messages over long distances. However, shadow projection worked differently. With it, Estelle could see her brother at any time, no matter where she was. It was a great gift, and she was grateful. She promised herself that no matter what, she would have to get revenge. At that moment, she received a small message from her brother in which he wrote that she was definitely proud of him. She didn't notice Mr. Ricardo enter the building. His appearance was as unnoticeable as always. She only realized it when he came closer and spoke to her. The girl asked what had happened and asked him with concern if he was feeling well. Ricardo appreciated her attention, but assured her that everything was fine. Nothing had happened. He was interrogated in the castle of Vazio. He told everything he knew, but warned that if he did not tell the truth, he would simply be killed. He understood how dangerous the situation was. He and his friends carried out the orders of the darkness, but they knew nothing about the goals and identity of the Grey Cardinal. This was terrible because the puppeteer hid behind his puppets, leaving no trace. Despite this, she received information about another spy. He had a scar under his eye that could help find him. This was an important discovery that could lead to a solution. In addition, the spy wore a medal on his chest. This was another noticeable sign. He was also a master in handling a sword, which gave him a considerable advantage. Thanks to these skills, he found himself in the Duke's castle as a knight. These thoughts haunted the girl. She felt how important every moment was for her investigation. She quickly made a decision and told Ricardo that she wanted to check out the Swordsman Training Center. It was an important place, and she felt that there was something important to learn there. Ricardo did not object and immediately agreed to take her. He understood her impatience. The girl could not calm down, constantly asking when they would finally get to this place. Here, finally on the horizon, appeared the walls of that very training center that she had been waiting for so long. A place where many secrets were hidden, ready to be revealed. The Duchess was looking forward to the moment when she could understand what was hidden behind all these walls. Something important must be hidden in this place, and she felt it. But something caught her attention before she reached her destination. The Miley grass. This rare plant which she saw for the first time in such quantity, and she could not understand what it was doing here. Suddenly a young guy appeared in front of them, curiously asking what brought them to this place. He looked interested but also a little confused, not understanding who was in front of him. He was obviously delighted by the girl's beauty and asked with genuine surprise who this beautiful lady was. However, Mr. Ricardo did not waste time and quickly ordered him to step aside, reminding him that she was the future wife of the Duke. The boy, meanwhile, continued to admire the young lady because she had already saved the lives of both His Highness and Mr. Ricardo. This was something special for him, and her courage made a deep impression on him. The older gentleman, noticing their interest, offered to show them the training hall. The lady added that it would be interesting to see how the training was conducted because she could not miss the chance to see it with her own eyes. The young knight agreed without hesitation and willingly led them to the training area where they could see how the classes were conducted and what was going on within the walls of this training center. In the training hall at this time, each of the young knights competed with others, honing their fencing skills. This was serious work preparation for future battles and trials. The training session was in full swing during their visit, which upset the lady a little as she was hoping to see the guy with the scar on his face, but apparently fate decided that she had to wait a little. At this time, 2 young recruits who were just starting their path to knighthood were watching in the gym. These guys were so young that they managed to cause the trainer a lot of trouble and problems. The guy realized that he wouldn't be able to get rid of the kids. He decided to ask if he could finish the tour here because he had a lot to do, and time was running out. Ostal was glad that the tour was over because she was already heading to the right place. She promised that she would definitely come back next time when she had the opportunity. Ricardo hurried away, knowing that other knights would soon be arriving to prepare for the swordsmanship tournament. It was an important event that required a lot of time. The lady, hearing about this, immediately showed interest. Her attention was captured by what she learned about the tournament. This event became a reason for her to think. As it turned out, the competition was to take place in Severogartsev 2 in a month. It was a major event in which the best knights from the north participated, which caught her attention. In addition to the tournament, there was to be a parade and sword shows. The program promised to be incredibly interesting, and the girl thought that there would certainly be a healer among the knights. After some thought, it dawned on her. She quickly realized that she could use this opportunity to offer her assistance in the tournament. Today, the lady was going to tell the Duke about her desire to help in the tournament, but she was not sure how best to approach the matter. She wanted to find the right words. The situation was strange. The Duke looked at her with unusual pity, which caused her some confusion. She did not know how to interpret it. However, she felt that she was in excellent condition today. Her brother also noticed that her cheeks had become even plumper, which could indicate that she was feeling well. After waiting a little, the Duke turned to Astel, asking her how she was feeling today. He was paying attention to her condition and wanted to make sure she was okay. The girl, without hesitation, answered that she felt fine. Her answer was confident, and she did not show the slightest doubt about her well-being. Aeneas responded with a cold tone, and this reaction made the girl very surprised. She did not expect him to react like this, considering their recent conversation. There was no warmth in his eyes as before. A minute later, however, he suggested something unexpected, to go with him to the sea after dinner. This was not an ordinary proposal. His idea was clearly more than just a walk. The girl was stunned because she did not even suspect that the mansion had an outlet to the sea, but it turned out that it was not in the mansion itself, but on his duchy. She remembered reading about the sea freezing in winter and really wanted to see it. As a child, she was always drawn to the sea, loved to walk along the coast and look at the endless waves. It was her place for reflection and peace. The sea air brought her peace. But now she had a problem. She had already promised to meet her brother, and she couldn't cancel the meeting. But the thought of the sea and Anaïs's offer continued to torment her. Anaïs, noticing her confusion, felt that something was wrong. He looked at the girl carefully and, worried, asked if everything was okay. He clearly understood that something was bothering her. Hearing her refusal, the girl explained that she had to meet with her brother Cassian. As soon as he understood this, his face became more severe and his gaze sharp. He did not hide his displeasure. Pastel felt like even the grinding of Anaïs's teeth could be heard across the table. She felt the tension in the room growing, and she felt bad for disappointing him so much. But despite everything, Anaïs found a way to resolve the situation. He said that Cassian would be very busy today, and promised that he himself would do everything she asked. Our heroine realized that this could be her chance, but the situation was still risky. The Duke was very worried about her overwork in the medical center, and she did not know how he would react. However, she couldn't lie. Perhaps it would have been better to say that she was going to the tournament in search of someone. In any case, she couldn't miss such a chance, despite all the doubts. In an instant, she noticed the Duke's hand begin to move. This caught her attention, and she immediately realized that she had to act quickly not to miss the opportunity to help. She stood up and offered to treat the cut for His Highness. Embarrassment slowed her down a bit, but professionalism prevailed and she prepared to do her job. The lady prepared the necessary instruments, laying them out neatly on the table. Everything was at hand: bandages, a syringe, and various vials with unknown contents ready for use. A special box contained the entire set for treating wounds: syringes, bandages, bottles of medicine. Everything was carefully selected so as not to miss a single detail during treatment. She took his hand and quietly announced that she was beginning the treatment. Her voice was confident, but inside she felt a slight anxiety because the Duke's comfort depended on her actions. She warned him that the treatment might be a little painful, but that he was unlikely to feel much discomfort. This was important so that he would not worry unnecessarily. Suddenly, the Duke pulled his hand away. He was a little tense, and she immediately asked if everything was okay, if it hurt. His reaction worried her. When she touched his hand, his muscles tensed strongly, and she decided to act quickly to minimize possible discomfort and not give him time to hesitate. Like a true professional, she used various medications and bandages to patch up his arm as quickly and efficiently as possible. Everything went according to plan. After the work was completed, she raised her hands and said that everything was ready. Now the Duke would definitely not feel any discomfort and the wound would heal without complications. The Duke inquired about the condition of his seal, and the girl replied that everything was fine. She was sure that she had done everything correctly, but she still couldn't help but worry. He breathed a sigh of relief as there were no serious problems at the moment. Everything went as planned, and he felt much better. There was an awkward pause between them, but it was quickly broken by the Duke himself, who said that in any case, she would look after his health, giving him no reason to worry. She spoke in detail about the method she used herself, which was simple, fast, but extremely effective. Listening to her, you could see how much she admired this method. The girl believed that in a month, the Duke would have to undergo a special medical examination, but the guy did not quite understand what she was getting at. He immediately decided to ask her directly what she was really trying to achieve. This question made her blush, not expecting such a turn of events. Although it seemed obvious, she still decided to clarify. There was a knight's tournament in a month, and she hoped that he would take part. His Majesty was interested in how she knew about this event, and she said that she heard about it in the training hall. Anaïs was even more surprised by her answer, and she confirmed her words and added that she just wanted to see how the young knights trained. Then she asked if the knight Cassian was capable of showing off his skills just for fun, without having anything serious in mind. The Duke thought that the girl blushed at the memory of that guy, and this made him wary, although he could not understand what exactly had upset her so much. Anaïs felt jealous and became very angry, asking if she liked Cassian. It was an important question for him which tormented his thoughts. The girl, realizing that His Majesty had misunderstood her, immediately exclaimed, trying to explain that it was a misunderstanding. However, the guy was convinced that the young lady really liked Cassian grade, and this confused her a little. This conclusion came as a surprise to her because she had not thought that her words could lead to such conclusions in His Majesty. Suddenly, the guy declared that he himself was a knight, which was an unexpected and even somewhat strange statement for the girl. However, this is precisely why she respected him most of all, for his steadfastness, fortitude, and commitment to his principles. A mixture of emotions appeared on the guy's face. He seemed to have calmed down, but at the same time, anger was noticeable in his gaze. Something inside him clearly did not give him peace. The lady did not know how exactly to behave at this moment. However, she quickly realized that His Majesty especially loved to be praised like many others. She told how she had recently attended a knight's training session. She added enthusiastically that she now also wanted to become part of their ranks and participate in training. But the guy thought this idea was too risky. He immediately sensed the danger in this proposal and could not allow anything to go wrong. Astel assured him that everything would be fine, as she would be by his side and His Majesty would be able to protect her. She was confident in her abilities. With her sincere smile and confident tone, she waited for a response from the guy who couldn't decide how to react to her words. He was so surprised to hear such words that without thinking, he inclined his head towards her, showing his confusion. His concern for her was obvious, and this sincerity in the relationship touched the heroine's heart, making her heart beat faster. The Duchess wanted to express her gratitude for his concern for her, promising that she would try her best not to disappoint him. She added that she would not go anywhere until the seal disappeared completely. It was her confidence that inspired both of them. Astel's sincere smile and her emotions captured the Duke's heart, leaving him indifferent. He could not help but respond to her feelings. He realized that if the girl left and the seal disappeared, it would lead to disappointment that he did not want to experience. He felt like a little boy abandoned by everyone and immediately asked if she would leave once the seal was dispelled. The question seemed important to him, but at that moment it was too simple. A smile appeared on her face as she replied that such questions were completely unnecessary. It was obvious and she didn't understand why he was even asking, but she didn't say anything about it. Suddenly, taking her hand, he asked how they treated her in the castle. He was truly worried, knew that her situation was not easy, and was ready to offer help. Despite the beautiful atmosphere, the castle was still a foreign place to her. It was not her home, and she felt a little lost here. His expression changed immediately, which she noticed. His words and behavior changed. He became more and more gloomy. It became obvious that he was overcome by unpleasant thoughts and experiences, and this could not help but affect his condition. The Duke's skin turned pale, and his face showed concern. At that moment, he realized that he urgently needed to call a physician, but he was too weak to make a decision right away. Walking through the garden, she thought about the Duke's fate because she was worried about his condition, but the doctors could not find anything serious, although they suggested that the problem could be related to the seal. She couldn't understand what was happening and didn't know how to help. She was near him all day, touching him often, but she didn't notice anything unusual. This added to her worries. Even the doctor, having examined him, found no reason to worry. However, this did not stop her from worrying. They both held hands, and it was clear that she cared about his condition. Anais gave her simple but very useful teleportation bracelets. It was convenient, especially if she needed to go somewhere urgently. She accepted the gift with gratitude. As he carefully placed the bracelet on her hand, she felt a slight tickle that made her blush, but she was sure that this gesture had no romantic intentions. She had no experience in relationships and didn't know what to feel. Showing care was important to her, but she tried not to think about it and remained reserved. To distract herself from these thoughts, she decided to walk around the castle and look at the moon. It was one of the few pleasures that brought her peace and tranquility. But suddenly she noticed something strange against the background of the moon. In its light, a silhouette was barely visible, which resembled either a bird or a bat. It was mysterious and attracted attention. The silhouette soon became clearer, and she realized that it was something unusual. To her surprise, it was a magical animal, and it was moving towards her with some purpose. A moment later, a small fox appeared in front of her, holding an envelope in its mouth. The animal looked cute, but her attention was drawn to the envelope it carried with it. This sight greatly amused her. She could not help but smile, and curiously asked the little animal what he was doing on such a night, whether he had brought any message. The fox came up and handed her a piece of paper. Once in the heroine's hands, the paper began to glow slightly, and this was due to its magical nature. The letter was clearly important. As soon as she took the letter, it immediately began to glow with a bright, soft light. It was not ordinary paper, but something special that told her the importance of the message. The letter contained text from Marat, the heir to the Silver Fox lineage who was just beginning to learn to write. His handwriting was still clumsy, but his words carried genuine warmth. Despite his young age, Marat had been trained in swordsmanship since birth. He had mastered the skill well and could easily demonstrate it on the knight's training ground. The maids said that the new girl in the castle had an amazing talent for brewing potions. This was the reason why Master Ricardo valued her so much and why everyone in the castle loved her. In the letter, Marat also asked if she could create a potion that would make people braver, or at least one that would make parents more affectionate to improve their relationship. If such a drug could really be created, the boy was ready to give all his saved money because he had been saving it for a long time. He was sure that it was worth it. Our heroine found this letter very sweet. She asked the fox to wait a little while she prepared the medicine, then she promised that she would find her as soon as it was ready. The spirit animal was very happy about this news and could not hide its delight. Its joy was so strong that the heroine herself felt it. Within a minute, the fox was in the arms of our heroine. Happiness and gratitude were visible in her eyes, and the heroine felt her heart fill with warmth. And so while playing with the animal, the heroine suddenly felt a strange, sweet smell. It came straight from the fox, and it was something completely unusual for her. This smell was incredibly pleasant and amazing. The fox looked so cute that the heroine decided to pet it, not knowing that there was something more hidden behind this gesture. Finally, a new day came when the brother and the duke went to check the place where the camp for the war against monsters would be located. It was an important moment for their entire team. The most long-awaited events were supposed to happen in the next chapter. The heroine's brother would finally see his son, about whom he knew nothing. This moment would change his life. This concerned not only the life of her brother but also the life of the heroine herself. Miss Rudy, the head maid, asked her if she was very worried about the Duke not being in the castle for a long time. The heroine replied that this was not true at all. She understood that their separation would be long, but if something went wrong, she would always be able to contact the Duke using the bracelet. Meanwhile, Cassian was worried as he watched his brothers in arms prepare to leave. Although it was time for him to go, his anxiety did not let up, and his body shook violently with excitement. He was gloomy and nervous. His body was shaking, and everything indicated that his intuition was working like never before. In fact, a few hours ago, he received an alarming letter that spoke of big problems. It concerned his sister, which worried him greatly. Until now, there had been no problems, and this worried him. Cassian decided he would head to the capital immediately after he had inspected the camp. He was eager to see his sister, but he was tormented by the guilt of leaving the rest of the mansion alone. His feelings towards the Duke were far from positive. On the contrary, he could not contain his hatred towards this man, considering him treacherous and dishonest. The Duke rode up to the young man on his horse and looked him intently in the eyes. Cassian could not understand why His Majesty was looking at him so intently. Astal came up to say goodbye to him and wish him luck on his journey, her eyes full of care and warmth. The Duke did not hesitate to kiss Astal's hand as he said goodbye. This gesture agitated her brother, causing him even more suspicion and anxiety. Despite this moment, Cassian couldn't help but worry about his sister. He was worried that it was very cold outside and she might get sick. Everyone present began to guess that something was going on between the Duke and Astal because they were holding hands too tightly as if they couldn't tear themselves away. This was not the Fedya everyone knew as a cold-blooded and reasonable man. Now he was unexpectedly romantic and kind, which surprised everyone around. Cassian, on the contrary, was even more angry and dissatisfied with what was happening. He could not hide his anger seeing this strange change in the Duke's behavior. Anais turned and looked straight into Cassian's eyes. An awkward pause passed between them, full of silence and bewilderment. The Duke seemed about to ask her to kiss him goodbye. This request made her wary and wonder what was going on. Astal slowly leaned down to fulfill the request, but something in her soul stopped her, and she was not sure if she was doing the right thing. And only at that moment, when the kiss already seemed inevitable, Astal finally understood what was happening. The whole meaning of this situation became clear to her. Anais said that the kiss was necessary for the sake of the seal, but in reality it was his personal whim requiring his will to be carried out. Their lips were about to meet, and everything around seemed frozen in that moment. But at the very last moment, the lady took His Highness's hand, kissed it softly, and this gesture confused the guy. The lady, slightly moving away, asked him in a reserved tone if such a kiss was appropriate. Her tone was calm, but her gaze hid something more that made him think. The guy, not knowing what to do, suddenly wanted to feel her lips, at least through his fingers, so he kissed his hand and, trying to regain confidence, said that they would see each other again soon. It was far from a simple farewell, as if there was something more between them than just indifference. He felt something sparkle between them, and something fluttered in his chest. At this time on the street, the guy's colleague suddenly started beating him. He mockingly said that now he would be shown how to behave properly in society, and the guy did not know how to react to this. All around him was a snowfield covered in a white blanket. The cold made even the air seem sticky, and on the horizon there were only dull and gloomy cliffs. The silence around him seemed strange, unnatural. It was so absolute that the boy felt as if he were in another world where there were no sounds, only cold air and snow. His thoughts kept returning to the sweet words the lady had said to him, and her gaze was constantly in his head. It was like steel piercing his soul, and he couldn't shake the feeling. The guy was also worried about the way the girl looked at Cassian, his brother. There was something strange in her gaze, and he didn't know how to react to it. All his thoughts were confused, and he was worried about her. The inner anxiety did not leave him. He did not know how to behave in this situation. Everything that was happening around him seemed too complicated to him, and he was only worried about how it would affect the girl. Suddenly, he was distracted by the sounds of a fight that was unfolding in front of him. Several men were fighting among themselves, and the guy could not understand what caused this conflict. It was completely unexpected because the fight had started on the very first day of his reconnaissance. He was shocked by it, and he had no clear answer as to who had initiated it. He watched as the knights tried to restrain Cassian. They held him from both sides, but he still did not give in and continued to fight, as if he did not understand what was happening. But despite the knights' efforts, Cassian broke free and grabbed one of his opponents by the collar. He ominously declared that if he did not apologize, he would immediately wring his neck. The Duke was interested in the cause of the conflict between the Therianthropes and humans because the gap between them was colossal. However, he did not expect the situation to lead to a fight. This surprised him. The Therianthrope could not help but start hurling insults at Cassian's sister. These words only provoked him further, and his rage increased with each word. When the situation reached its peak, the Duke himself intervened, deciding to restore order to this stormy scene. His appearance immediately changed the course of events. Everyone around instantly fell silent and stood still in fear. The atmosphere changed dramatically, and the tension became even more palpable. The Duke firmly ordered the punishment of the one who dared to use violence against the knights of the duchy. His voice sounded decisive and peremptory. The young man replied that he would accept the punishment, but insisted on justice for those who mocked Astal. He was ready to defend his point of view. The knight was sure that the Duke would support him, since in his opinion he would certainly take his side in this matter. He believed in the rightness of his action. Upon hearing the knight's words, Anais calmly declared that Cassian was completely innocent. His opinion was firm and could not be questioned. The knights could not understand why the Duke was so sure of Cassian's innocence. It seemed to them that he did not understand the seriousness of what was happening and did not delve into the details of the conflict. At this point, the Duke looked at the knights with a look full of anger and icy determination. He could not believe that they dared to behave like this. The Duke could not understand how they could condemn the man he himself had defended. This was unacceptable to him. He warned that if it happened again, he would punish them severely. The knights were at a loss, not understanding what was happening. The Duke added that there was no place for people like them on the battlefield. There was a clear threat in his voice. Knights who dared to offend were caught and banished to the northern territories where they were not allowed to return. This was effectively a sentence equal to execution, since returning would mean death. In just a few minutes, the matter was resolved. The Duke, without wasting any time, continued on his way with Cassian, ignoring the recent tense situation, as if it were already beyond their concerns. Astel thanked for the fairness of the intervention. Her words were sincere, and she realized how important it was to stop the violence and punish the perpetrators so that others would know the consequences. However, there was one thing that bothered Aeneas greatly. He thought about it and asked the young man if he had fought over Astel. The question was serious, and his gaze was full of doubts that did not go away. The boy replied that if the knights had been mocking someone else, he would have done the same, but he mentally admitted that he couldn't hold back precisely because they were talking about Astel. That was his weak point. Hearing this, the Duke thought about it and drew his own conclusions. He was glad that he had understood everything correctly, and expressed satisfaction that the young man was ready to act in the girl's interests, even if it put him at risk. The Duke decided to be straightforward and asked the knight to show no further interest in his ward. It was important for his own peace and the girl's safety, and he did not want to allow complications. However, the guy saw nothing but a strange sense of ownership, which he had experienced more than once. It seemed to him that the Duke was too attached to Astel, and this was beginning to alarm him. Only now did the youth begin to realize that the Duke was probably in love with the girl. It became obvious, and his inner tension increased because the Duke's feelings were more than just concern for his ward. This was dangerous for Astel herself, as everything the Duke touched would sooner or later be destroyed. He was known for his cruel actions, and now his feelings could threaten her. The young man's thoughts were interrupted by the Duke, who at that moment spoke to him with particular zeal. His determination was obvious, and he clearly had no intention of leaving the situation unattended. The Duke swore that if anyone dared to say anything bad about Astel again, he would kill that person. His words sounded menacing, and it seemed that he was ready to carry out his threat immediately. The captain, speaking with his protégé, explained that in any case they had no choice but to give him a probationary period. This measure was necessary to show that actions must have consequences. Still, the Duke made a decision and took action. They could not turn a blind eye to the youth's actions, and now he had to return to the capital where his further fate and strict examination awaited him. The main character's brother felt the injustice of what was happening. He was sure that he was not to blame for the beginning of this stupid fight, because it did not start with him. He could not understand why he found himself in the center of the conflict. However, after thinking for a while, he realized that there was a positive side to this situation. It was a great chance, because in this way he could get to the capital first and advance his business. He immediately decided to send a letter to his sister through the bird so that she would know of his intentions. He was in a hurry and could not tell her everything in detail, so he only told her the most necessary things. A suspicion arose in his mind about Duke Aeneas. He considered him extremely suspicious and preferred to keep his distance from him, fearing that his presence could only add to the trouble. He asked his sister not to touch him until they met again. He knew their relationship could be complicated, but it was important that she understood his request. A fair was to be held in the duchy soon, at which our heroine's charges Jenny and her friend were going to sell cookies and many other tasty treats. Mrs. Stahl also planned to set up her stall at the fair, but kept secret what she would sell. This intrigued everyone who knew her reputation, and everyone expected something unusual. And so finally, our heroine arrived at the fair, where she was happily greeted by Miss Dell. She had prepared the perfect stall for her. Everything was done in a style that perfectly matched the tastes and preferences of the woman. The colossal difference between our heroine's shop and other retail outlets was immediately noticeable. In addition, the woman tried to make each product name unique, which added even more charm to her trade. The engraving on the shop sign where its name was written was made of 20-karat gold, which immediately attracted the attention of passers-by and became a noticeable detail at the fair. The lady began offering her wares to everyone passing by. She was sure that everyone who stopped by her shop would definitely find something of interest, and that her wares would not leave anyone indifferent. The first clients were young guys who showed interest in the hair growth balm. They began to ask about the product with curiosity, and our heroine happily began to talk about its benefits. He tried to make the hair that had fallen out grow back and the frizzy hair become smoother, but the process seemed too strange, almost magical. He began to doubt the reality of what was happening. To make sure the drug was effective, he asked to use it on his mustache because it just couldn't grow despite all his attempts. This was an important test for him. The lady happily spread the product on his face, and in the blink of an eye his mustache became lush and beautiful. It was an effect that astounded everyone present. Everyone who was nearby was simply shocked by such an incredible result. They immediately decided that they would buy this balm without thinking because the effect was amazing. Another woman whose dog began to shed heavily and lose fur also turned to the balm. She also hoped for a miracle like everyone else. Soon, a crowd of curious people gathered around the heroine who had similar problems with their pet's fur. They were all ready to try this miracle balm. People no longer had to worry about their pets losing hair or becoming fluffier. Even baldness was no longer such a big deal because now there was a way to deal with it. In a few minutes, a huge crowd had already gathered around the shop where the balm was sold. Everyone was amazed by the quick and effective result, which became a sensation. The heroine's charges were delighted with the way things were going. They came to see her shop, and its success was a real miracle to them. It was what they had hoped for. They were pleasantly surprised by the beauty of the shop and the quality of preparation. The place looked very neat and attractive, which only increased their admiration. It was an incredible success. Even the heroine herself did not expect such a result. She did not think that the reaction would be so positive and lively. This popularity soon led to great interest from her father, who had many artifacts. Although she already had Sam's artifact for communication, she still did not understand how to use it. She needed to learn how to use her appraiser's abilities to properly assess the artifact and be confident in how to use it to contact spies or find the power broker. Duke Aeneas had one big problem. He constantly hid his identity. But fortunately, over time, the novel revealed some important aspects of his character, including his hair loss problem. Whenever he heard about some new hair growth elixirs, he would immediately try to contact those who could help him, hoping that this would be the solution to his problem. At this time, the director of the medical center, Melis, approached them. He was dressed with impeccable taste, as always, and it seemed that he had not seen the girl with whom he had his affairs for a long time. It was this Melis who once greatly abused our heroine. He was a vile man who secretly stole the medicines that she worked so hard to create. Before, she had never even suspected that she would be able to resist such a person. Now, however, she began to understand that she had the power to fight him. Melis didn't stand on ceremony for long and immediately began to be sarcastic, trying to get her angry, as if he was deliberately testing her strength, hoping that she would give in. The lady, however, did not succumb to his provocations and answered with restraint that everything was fine with her, trying not to show that his words could hurt her. In fact, he was extremely annoyed. It angered him that a simple girl like her was in such a favorable position and could even compete with important people like him in the Duke's mansion. For Melis, this was a real insult. He could not understand how some little man could bypass him, getting ahead of him in what concerned his own interests. He decided that this time she would be used by him again. He was going to take away everything she had achieved as he had before to regain control of the situation. After all, she was just a poor beggar, and this gave him reason to believe that she was worth nothing in his eyes. Melis chuckled and began to tell her that everyone was talking about her hair growth balm. He wanted to know the secret, hoping that she would reveal it to him. He said that his product would sell very well and asked to share the secret, hoping that it would help him achieve success. But his request met with an unexpected answer. Unexpectedly for him, the girl refused, and such an answer surprised him greatly. He could not believe that she dared to reject his request, and even more so refused so decisively. Her refusal angered him terribly. How could she respond to his kindness like that? It seemed to him completely disrespectful, and he felt that her behavior was deliberately insulting. In a fit of anger, he was about to raise his hand against her, but Miss Rudel intervened. She stopped him, not allowing him to continue his threats, and by her intervention prevented further aggression. Miss Rudel asked who he was, which alarmed the young man. This question confused him. He felt that the situation had become dangerous and did not know how to answer such an unexpected question. Miss Rudel twisted his arm hard, and her grip was so tight that he knew she wouldn't let go until she got an answer. She wanted to find out who this guy was, and she wasn't going to give in. He admitted that he worked as a manager at a clinic outside the duchy. His former boss fired him, and now he was servicing the clinic. The woman told him to address the lady as Ms. Astal. He felt bitter and disappointed, believing that he was in a helpless situation. The girl seemed ungrateful and spiteful to him. He thought that she did not appreciate what he had done for her. He was sure that she shouldn't treat the man who raised her from poverty like that. He promised to ruin her reputation. The girl didn't share the secret of her hair bomb with him, and this greatly angered him. A few days after the incident at the fair, the former director of her clinic began actively spreading rumors. He said that the girl had betrayed her mentor by not giving the secret to the hair bomb. However, despite the gossip, the Trianthropes were not interested in rumors about the man. They discussed more the secret of the hair bomb itself, and this was much more important to them than the story about the girl itself. Thanks to these rumors, talk of the bomb began to spread far beyond the duchy. The bomb became popular even in distant lands, and the girl received additional attention and recognition. Suddenly, His Excellency decided to contact the girl. This decision was unexpected, and everyone was intrigued, which made him interested in her fate again. Special artifacts were used for communication, but for some reason, the connection with the girl was not established. The question remained unclear, and everyone was puzzled by this circumstance. And now finally he met her. As always, he was enchanted by her appearance, her magnificence. But now that he saw her again, he realized that his feelings had become even stronger. He noticed her for the first time, and it even seemed like a smile appeared on his face. Meeting her gaze, he felt a slight excitement that he had not experienced before. It was something unusual for him. The girl asked how he was doing, and the guy smiled and said that everything was fine. He immediately asked about her affairs, asking about her well-being, showing concern and attention. She replied that she was doing just fine. There had been a fair in the duchy a few days ago, and she had also set up her stall, proud to be able to take part in such an event. She happily reported how much everyone admired her products, and everything quickly sold out. The products were sold out in no time, and she was happy that her work was so highly appreciated. Only now did the Duke realize what she had gone through in Therianthropes. He was shocked by how much discrimination she had suffered, but he had never thought about it before. These thoughts shook him, and he seemed to freeze in thought. His gaze became empty, and he himself found himself in a state as if he was floating in the clouds, far from reality, absorbed in thoughts. Estelle noticed his strange expression and became concerned. She cautiously asked if he was okay, not knowing what had caused such a reaction in the hero. The Duke, having somewhat recovered his senses, said that everything had been resolved as it should have been. But the lady did not understand what exactly had happened, for his words did not explain the reason for his sudden thoughtfulness. She decided to ask something important. She was interested in why the Knights of the capital did not participate in the establishment of the base camp, because it was quite strange and could mean something important. The interest in the adaptation of people in a new place was obvious. The Duke replied that everything was fine with them, after which the lady was very happy to hear that her worries were in vain. He specifically said that everyone except Cassian had completed the task to see how the lady would react. This was done with the cunning purpose of causing a reaction and drawing attention to his brother's behavior. His Majesty explained that the reason for his punishment was his fights with the Trianthropic Knights, and that was why he was being punished. This explanation seemed quite plausible, but not everything was so obvious. However, this sounded strange because the punishment for knights in the novel was usually related to actions in the duchy, which suggested possible changes in the plot. The novel could clearly begin to lose its previous form, but Cassian was not allowed to serve his sentence. His vacation to the capital to meet his son was planned, and then suddenly the news came that he had left earlier than expected. This added new questions and doubts. The girl felt much better after hearing the news. She realized that her brother was okay, and this calmed her soul. She stopped worrying because it seemed that everything had been resolved safely. The story had not changed significantly, and now there was no need to worry. The lady looking at the Duke asked if everything was all right with him. Perhaps he was worried not only about his illness, but also about the worries about the current situation. But when she heard that he had accurately guessed all her symptoms, she became very worried. It meant that he was feeling worse than he seemed, and now she had to be even more attentive to his condition. The guy calmly said that it was all because they hadn't seen each other for a long time. It was strange because there had never been such manifestations before. He tried to calm her down, although he himself was a little worried about his illness. The guy smiled at her, looking with kindness and warmth. His look was so sincere that the lady felt warm inside. It made her blush, and she could not hide her embarrassment. He wanted to meet her not only to justify his illness, but to truly feel her closeness. It was more than just physical attraction. It was a deep affection, and she promised to be with him forever. Unexpectedly, he announced that he had prepared something nice for her. The lady was surprised, and curiosity and anticipation played in her eyes. Now she was impatiently waiting for what he had prepared for her. In the end, the Duke didn't say anything important. They just chatted about local affairs, and the conversation seemed empty because they really just missed each other. It was a kind of quiet conversation without any particular topics. Suddenly, His Majesty unexpectedly took an interest in the girl she often mentioned among her friends. He said that he would like to meet her relatives, friends, mentor, and other important people from her circle. The girl was delighted by this news. She thought that she could invite her brother to the upcoming event, but the Duke added that only those who were not related to Cassian Grey could attend. This changed her plans. Questions immediately arose in the girl's mind. What to do with the invitations? Her brother was closely connected to Cassian, and now she did not know what to do. It was necessary to choose who to invite without breaking the Duke's word. The girl could not understand why her brother and the Duke did not have a good relationship. She did not see any obvious reasons for a quarrel between them, because there were no serious conflicts between them. Everything seemed much more complicated. But despite this, she was glad that she had received permission to work as a doctor at the upcoming fencing competition. It was an important event for her, and she was ready to dedicate herself to this matter despite all the other problems. She had no choice but to sacrifice her brother's participation in the competition for the chance to unravel who really is the Grey Cardinal behind all the behind-the-scenes games and manipulations in their world. She decided to get up and work on her journal a little. She had thoughts that needed to be written down so she wouldn't forget important moments and draw conclusions from what was happening in her life. Since childhood, she had been writing down her thoughts in this diary. It was a gift from her brother, and since then it has become her faithful companion, where she could express everything she couldn't say out loud. In her diary, she often wrote about the Duke, who always took care of her even when he was far away. She felt his concern and care, which gave her confidence and a sense of security. He allowed her to attend the fencing competition as a doctor, and this was an important step for her. She felt that it brought her closer to him, and it gave her joy. The next day, she went with her grandfather, Ricardo, who was responsible for organizing the competition. He was an important figure in these events, and her participation made him very happy. Grandfather was glad that she would be present, as it gave him the opportunity to see her more often. He said that her help inspired him and made him feel more energetic. Our heroine smiled and promised to try hard at the competition. She was happy that her grandfather was so inclined. He, in turn, noted that her presence gave him strength and cheerfulness. During the conversation, Grandpa also asked what was going on with Melis. He had heard that this man was spreading evil rumors about her and wanted to find out what was behind it. Ricardo promised that if Melis continued to pester her, he would deal with him personally to stop any inappropriate rumors and interference. At that moment, Mr. Basile approached them. He was flattered that she remembered his name, and he could not hide his pride at being noticed among the others. The old man was not delighted with his appearance. He sharply asked him to get down to business and leave quickly because he did not like it when his conversations were interrupted by strangers. The boy, despite the old man's displeasure, handed over the important documents. He said that this was necessary to organize further work and had to quickly return to his duties. She was surprised to learn that he was not only involved in fencing instruction, but also in administrative work. This revealed new sides of his personality that she had not noticed before. He said that the list of knights included medical questionnaires with photographs of each of them. This was necessary to check their health before the competition. The grandfather was very angry when he heard that the boy suggested meeting in the barracks. He insisted that all issues be resolved in the clinic and ordered the boy to immediately meet the girl in a more suitable place. One of the most important tasks was the completion of the work on compiling information about the knights of the duchy. Particular attention was paid to one detail, the lightning-shaped scar which will appear in the list. The girl hoped that if she worked hard, she would be able to find the Grey Cardinal faster, but the list of questionnaires turned out to be so long that she could not stand it and fell asleep right among the documents. Having worked all night on the papers, the girl realized that she had only done a small part of the work, and the remaining mountain of questionnaires would be waiting for her. She decided to take a little rest before continuing. As she fell asleep, the girl felt a strange glow that began to emanate from the magic stone. It was a sign, and the connection that appeared was clearly not accidental but significant. The connection was with her brother, and the reason he had decided to contact her now was obvious. It was about the child. The situation was serious, and she immediately knew she had to intervene. Through the magic stone, she saw his face full of discontent. He was obviously worried, and the girl did not waste time. She immediately asked what had happened and why he was calling her so urgently. She recognized that expression on Cassian's face when his anxiety was at its peak, when he was faced with something he couldn't solve. That was when he always looked like he was about to face some unbearable disaster. This face was familiar to her, and she knew for sure that he would immediately go to Rachel. There, he would have to face a difficult situation related to their child, and everything seemed to be just beginning. As hard as it was, she left him, and the child, left an orphan by her death, now faced one terrible problem. He suffered from magic congestion syndrome, an illness that tormented him greatly. This disease is rare but fatal, in which the accumulated telematic energy repeatedly collides and explodes, destroying the life force and eventually leading to the death of the host. The only way to control this energy is a potion that almost no one can make. Even if someone could, the price for this potion would be astronomical. In the conversation, he was interrupted by his brother, who turned to his sister with a question to which she answered without expressing any emotion, and asked with interest what he wanted to know from her. She didn't give anything away, didn't even show that she knew more than she was saying, and calmly asked what exactly Cassian wanted to discuss with her. Cassian asked her thoughtfully if she remembered the potion she had spent nights working on, absorbed in studying it. He knew how much effort she had put into it. She replied that she remembered everything perfectly because she had learned to make a potion that helps control rampant mana. It was not just knowledge, but her true skill. She was proud of herself because she had practiced a lot and swore to herself that studying these potions was not only the path to the duchy, but also a way to save her nephew who was doomed to suffer. Seeing the suffering of her little nephew, she also experienced it because it was extremely difficult to watch the child suffer. Her desire to cure him was motivated by this strong feeling. She said with confidence that now, having become an experienced doctor, he would be able to turn to her at any time and she would help him. When he saw the image of his sister imprinted in the gemstone, he realized that his little sister had grown up and could now say such serious and adult things that would have been beyond her ability before. He said he would contact the girl when he really needed her help, and expressed gratitude for her support, realizing how important this was for him in the current situation. A few days later, as he reflected on what had happened, he realized that he did not want to place the full burden of responsibility for his son on his sister, despite all his own doubts and worries. In any case, he made a decision to come to her without delay and do it before it was too late, because everything he did was for the sake of the future child, and he could not leave him in trouble. At this time, full preparations for the fencing competition began. The main character, having looked through the entire list of participants, could not find a single knight with a lightning-shaped scar under his eye, which was quite strange. The character in question was extremely mysterious, and her involvement this year was becoming increasingly mysterious. In addition, the hair growth bomb was well known in the Empire, but the artifact appraiser never made contact. All this information greatly worried the girl. She did not know what to do next, what to do with what was happening, and how to solve all the questions that arose before her without a clear path to a solution. She was upset because her expectations were not met according to the plan, and nothing was resolved as she had hoped. However, on the other hand, there were also events that unexpectedly resolved themselves and gave a little hope. Meanwhile, Mr. Ricardo and Cardew were punishing the young man. He complained of pain, but understood that punishment was a natural part of the process. The old man, noticing his weakness, asked why he could not properly prepare for the competition. The old man was sure that the guy had walked past the hotel on purpose to spy on the main character's things, and he understood that it was a calculated act with some intention. He couldn't be mistaken. Mr. Ricardo, always a strict enforcer of order, warned that if the boy continued to behave like this, he would deprive him of the right to be here. He did not allow anyone, not even Melis, to disturb the peace. At that moment, a small guy walked into her office unexpectedly. For everyone, he was clearly not ready to appear before her, but something made him come here that day. The little guy opened the door, cautiously greeting her with slight embarrassment. He looked as if he was afraid of breaking some invisible rule, but he decided to take this step anyway. It was the heir of the Black Fox family. Fate had led them to meet him, and the main character did not expect to meet a white heir whose story was connected to her own. He brought exactly what he promised. This boy represented one of the 4 vassal families of the Black Fox duchy. The child was from a family renowned for their magical tools and sorcery in the north. The main character could not believe that her fate would intersect with this heir. It was not just a meeting, but a moment that was to have a radical impact on her future life. He handed her a piece of paper that turned out to be a special magical contract of the Black Fox family. This contract was not just a document, it was becoming an important part of their relationship. The contract was magical. If anyone other than her tried to force their way into its contents, the magic would repel them. It was a defense mechanism for artifact appraisers to keep secrets from being revealed. Astel was grateful and touched. She stroked his head, expressing her gratitude. Despite the seriousness of the situation, her heart warmed, and she was pleased that everything went according to plan. She thought it was natural to prepare in advance, and she was sure she had made no mistake. She had carefully fulfilled her promise, preparing a potion for him that would give him courage. He was very grateful, but did not know how best to express his feelings. Hugging the bottle, he thanked the girl again, but apparently could not think of anything to thank her properly. He immediately opened the bottle and eagerly took the potion, expecting it to give him courage right away. The heroine found it very cute, and she watched his reaction with a smile. After he tasted the potion, his face immediately twisted with bitterness. She, noticing his reaction, asked if he felt his heart begin to beat strongly, checking if the potion was working. She put her hand on his heart and felt it pounding. It was the moment when he found his courage, and it was obvious that it was literally overflowing in him, like excess energy. Just from the thought that he had actually become brave, he felt this courage growing inside him with every moment, as if it were becoming more and more with every breath. Astel noticed that his voice was much rougher now. The previously soft intonations had changed, and now his words sounded with confidence, which was due to the potion. After confirming that the potion was indeed effective, he happily hugged her, expressing his gratitude. His face was shining, and he was immensely happy that he felt the results so quickly. Suddenly, as if from somewhere, she felt a strange smell coming from him. It was unfamiliar, and Astel could not understand what exactly. This aroma was not associated with anything familiar. He himself noticed the strange smell and asked her if she could smell it. During the conversation, he told her that his father, the head of the family, also often complained about his unusual smell, but the guy himself did not notice it. This became a real mystery for Astel. She wondered what could be the reason for this unusual aroma that emanated from his body, and what exactly about him attracted her attention so much. The smell was like a mixture of different herbs or plants, among which the aroma of the medicinal herb melee stood out clearly. Why it smelled like no other, she could not understand, and this puzzled her. Suddenly, the door opened and his grandfather entered the room. He looked a little tired, but his gaze was calm. Immediately after entering, he announced that the Duke would be back in 2 hours, which made the girl happy. He said that a knight from the Duke's company had just reported that the Duke was going to return. This news made the girl very happy because she understood that their time with this man was coming to an end. When His Excellency arrives, Mr. Ricardo will no longer be able to pretend to be her guardian, and this will become obvious to everyone watching what is happening in the castle. She kept the girl close to her and called the boy to join her. There was already a certain atmosphere in their circle that needed to be maintained so as not to raise unnecessary questions. At last the Duke returned home, and this moment was an important event for all who were awaiting his appearance, for his return always brought excitement and change. She was returning on her horse, and he looked simply magnificent. He had such an alluring quality that you could immediately notice something different around him. His special aura was in the air. Upon entering the castle, he was greeted with honors. Servants hastened to provide all necessary services, since the presence of the Duke was always associated with official obligations and important decisions. He was so handsome that even our heroine couldn't help but admire him. He stood out from everyone else, and this couldn't help but leave an impression on everyone who was nearby. The castle was home to representatives of high-profile clans, including the Jaguar clan and the Shark clan, indicating the importance of this gathering and its role in political games. There was also a family of silver foxes, and it was the boy from this family who attracted the heroine's attention, because her thoughts about him still did not leave her. After thinking for a moment, the lady realized that it was Belle's father standing in front of her, and this discovery made her even more attentive to what was happening, because she understood the importance of this moment. It seemed to her that some invisible force emanated from this man, which immediately made her feel something important and mysterious in this meeting. All the representatives of the family bowed before the Duke and expressed their admiration for his return, but he, as always, paid no attention to them, leaving them in his shadow. In fact, his interest was focused solely on one person, and taking a few steps forward, he bowed before her to show how important her presence was to him. His gaze was full of love and tenderness. He looked at her with such delight that it became clear he had missed her for a long time, and now he could not hide his emotions. Our heroine couldn't help but feel joy that everything went as she expected. Everything was in its place, and she felt relieved. Without thinking, the boy kissed Astel's hand, and this gesture was not just a sign of respect, but something more than words. The servants present at this were surprised, because the Duke ignored even the greetings of the vassals, concentrating all his attention only on his lady, which was unexpected for everyone. It was the first time they saw him with such a gentle smile that it seemed strange. Meanwhile, he invited her to have dinner together, explaining that he wanted to spend time with her, enjoying her company. The girl agreed without hesitation. Her joy was sincere. She felt that this moment was changing something between them, and she could not refuse such a simple but pleasant offer. Mr. Ricardo stood to the side with an unusual expression on his face. He covered the child's eyes so that he could not see the adults exchanging a kiss, which looked a little strange in this situation. At this time, Mr. Dahl was dreaming about the future, imagining how he would serve the Duchess. He often imagined himself next to our heroine, caring for her and caring for her well-being. He took her hand and with a slight gesture invited her into the castle. His sincere concern was felt in this invitation, and the girl, feeling his attention, followed him without asking unnecessary questions. The lady entering the room felt herself in a wonderful place. This place reminded her of the hunting grounds where she spent her childhood. A cozy log house reminiscent of her native land where she was happy. Walking through the room, she felt at home. It had that cozy atmosphere she was always looking for. Everything was so familiar that it seemed to her that this place had already become a part of her life. Anais asked her to sit down and make herself at home. His words were warm, and she accepted the invitation with a smile, feeling something special in his tone that made the atmosphere even more cozy. As soon as they sat down next to each other, something important happened between them. The couple felt a strong tension. It was obvious. They had not been alone for a long time, and this added a slight excitement to their relationship. His Majesty thought for a moment, not knowing what to say. He had been searching for the right words for a long time, and now, finally, he understood how to start a conversation with a lady in order to express his thoughts and feelings. He asked her if she liked this attic space. The lady replied that this place was really very comfortable and cozy. Her voice sounded sincere and pleasant. He was very happy about this, and he felt that his efforts had not been in vain. He had been preparing for this moment and hoped that everything would work out as he had planned, because her answer was important to him. At that moment, the lady felt the Duke's aura change. His demeanor became more serious and focused, which did not go unnoticed, and she intuitively understood that something important was happening. The Duke said that the lady could come to his premises at any time when he was not there. Apparently, he had to go to the capital, and he did not intend to stay there for long. Astel wondered why this was so, and in response learned that the Emperor had called. This news came as a surprise to her, and she could not understand where all this would lead. Even the Emperor himself could not help but admire the young and handsome Duke. This explained the boy's frequent summons to the capital, where the Emperor was going to discuss important matters and perhaps even conclude an alliance. The Duke often went to the capital, but it was known that he was not in love with her. It was just a formality important for the Emperor to strengthen his position in the north. Anais was known for his fidelity, but there was always one mysterious lover in his romance. Everyone knew about her, but few knew the details of their relationship. It was a topic around which many rumors circulated. This thought frightened Astel greatly. She could not understand how to be in such a situation and what place she would place herself in the Duke's life. The questions became more and more acute with each passing day. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by the gentleman himself, who unexpectedly told her about the new garden upstairs. Lydia was busy with the design, and the walls he had spoken about last time were already ready. Astel was delighted, forgetting her worries for a moment. It was a small but pleasant renewal, and she felt her heart thaw. She was grateful for the attention she was receiving. The Duke continued that he had called the master to add beauty to the garden, and around it he was sure that now this place would not only be cozy, but also ideal for relaxation. This also pleasantly surprised Astel. But suddenly the Duke said that these lands now belonged to Astel. He made such a decision, and it surprised her greatly. She did not expect that she would receive something so significant. He explained that now, instead of constantly giving, she had to get used to receiving. This was unusual for Astel, but at the same time she felt that she deserved it. At that moment, Astel looked at him and her heart sank. Anais seemed even sweeter to her. He took her hand and said that he was ready to give her everything she wanted, making her feel special. It was unexpected. Although his gaze had seemed cold and even frightening before it was now warm and caring, Astel felt the tension between them gradually disappear. Even his very cold hands, to her surprise, turned out to be unusually warm. She felt her body warming up as if it had just been on fire. She asked in surprise why he had not mentioned that his hands were so hot. When they were at a considerable distance from each other, she noticed that the Duke was clearly not feeling well. The magic stone he was holding conveyed the feeling that his heart was beating too fast, and this did not escape her attention. His face was purple, just as it had been when she first noticed his condition. She had let her guard down, forgetting the importance of the situation, but now she realized that she could not delay. She had to call a doctor immediately. Getting up, she was about to call the doctor, but the Duke asked her to conduct one experiment before that. The request surprised her, but she agreed. He explained that holding her hand did not bring relief and suggested trying something more effective. He looked her confidently in the eyes and asked if he could test whether his proposed method would help. The experiment seemed suspicious to her, but in the end it was treatment, and she was ready to do everything to help the patient. She agreed, because there was no one else who could help him, and she could not leave him in such a state. After thinking for a moment, she kissed his hand tenderly, and for a moment it seemed as if emotions were overflowing him. The lady asked hopefully if he was feeling any better, but unfortunately there was no answer. It seemed that the kiss on the hand did not have the expected effect, and despite this, she plucked up her resolve. The girl blushed already, thinking about what she had to do, but she understood that there was no other way to cope. It was extremely difficult because the Duke had an extraordinary beauty under the pretext of treatment. Despite his doubts, he decided to take this step. The lady kissed him on the forehead, after which she asked him to open his eyes. The Duke blushed even more from embarrassment. It seemed that he had not heard the girl's request, and nervously asked if he could now open his eyes. He was clearly confused and did not know how to react. The lady replied that the eyes could be opened. She also realized that the gesture probably had no healing effect, and that it would be better to call a doctor for more serious help. She was about to go to the door, but suddenly the Duke grabbed her hand and leaned over, asking what the kiss on the forehead meant. He looked puzzled and slightly surprised. It seemed to him that a kiss on the lips would be much more effective. After all, usually when they talk about a kiss, they mean a kiss on the lips, not on the forehead. But the girl was categorically against it. She asked him to kiss only on the forehead, but not on the lips. For her, this was an important moment that she was not ready to change. The lady blushed deeply, and the Duke felt his temperature drop. But here's the problem. Now something strange began to happen to his interlocutor, and he couldn't figure out what exactly. Her face turned bright red, and something inside her seemed to catch fire. It was a moment of awkwardness and strange tension that made both of them feel uncomfortable. However, the Duke did not stop there. He suggested trying something else, still smiling. His intentions became more and more mysterious and intriguing. He extended his hand to the girl, but she did not immediately understand what it meant. Her confusion only increased, and she did not know what the Duke expected of her at this moment. The girl stood there in complete confusion, not understanding what would happen next. Her thoughts were confused, and she could not imagine what this new proposal from the Duke could lead to. In just a moment, they left the castle, and the weather outside was amazing. The air was fresh and the sky was cloudless, which gave everything around an atmosphere of lightness and harmony. The lady's face was filled with indescribable delight, as if she had not expected the weather to be so perfect. There was a sparkle in her eyes and a smile on her lips as she breathed in the fresh air. The Duke couldn't hide his smile either. He was enjoying every moment. He was pleased to see her face fill with joy, and it seemed that even he himself became a little happier. The time spent together passed unnoticed, and the couple enjoyed each other. The walk turned out to be something unusual and touching for them, although in fact it was just a quiet meeting in the fresh air. After the walk, the girl began to realize that this was not just an ordinary day, but a kind of experiment. She did not even expect that it would be so romantic and draw her into its nets. The main character couldn't get rid of obsessive thoughts about romantic experiences. She felt like she was experiencing something unusual, and doubts swarmed in her head. Maybe she was becoming strange. His Majesty asked with interest how the girl felt being away from him. The lady replied that she felt constantly tired, while the Duke was filled with excitement, and his heart did not give him peace. It was surprising that the Duke's symptoms seemed to indicate what might be called a real state of love, which called into question his control over himself and his emotions. But the heroine had no experience in such matters. She did not understand what these feelings were and how they could be controlled, especially when they were so captivating and became so strong for a person. A few days later, after Duke Aeneas returned, there was a spark between them. It wasn't anything obvious, but the tension was palpable, and there was a strange chemistry in the air that hadn't been there before. The Duke, noticing this, turned to the girl, trying to elicit a response, but she, as often happens, fell asleep again, not having time to understand what was happening and how to react to it correctly. When she woke up, she took a deep breath and, surprised, asked what had happened. She noticed that she often fell asleep even if she was given enough time to rest, and this seemed strange to her. He pulled his hand away, but after a moment he took it back in his. The movement seemed a little strange, and she couldn't figure out what exactly was wrong. Perhaps it was the seal. The girl felt a strange feeling, unable to understand what was happening. The reason could be hidden in the seal, which seemed to make itself known, and she was having a hard time getting used to this feeling. She responded that the symptoms were now significantly different from those she had previously experienced. This was a clear sign that something had changed, but she could not figure out what it was. Deciding not to delay the decision, they called the attending physician to come and explain the reason for what was happening. When he came, he reported that the seal had become unstable for some reason. The doctor suggested that the reason for this could be the long distance between them, which led to some unpredictable consequences, but what exactly happened he did not know. He couldn't quite explain the reason for the instability, but he was sure of one thing. It was due to the fact that their feelings for each other were now divided and under some kind of strain. Hearing this, the girl was very surprised, although Aeneas's face remained calm and did not express any emotions. He did not show even the slightest interest in her reaction to the doctor's words. The doctor added that such a symptom usually appears when there is a strong, excessive connection between people, which confirmed that their connection was extremely strong and intense. He explained that this could explain their common pain and fatigue, since Madame Hotel was constantly falling asleep. This was due to the Duke being overtired, who was under too much strain. Normally the seal wasn't supposed to convey feelings, but there was some unexpected effect going on here. The doctor explained that maybe it was one of the side effects that couldn't be ignored. To get rid of these unpleasant symptoms, they needed to increase the closeness between them. Simply holding hands was no longer enough. Their connection required much more. The doctor warned that the Archmage should be aware of such instability, and added that something similar had happened to him once, and there was even a case when the seal was destroyed. These words alarmed the girl. She remembered the conversations about her father and his possible connection with such problems, which only added to the anxiety in her heart. The doctor began to recall the name of the family that had faced the same problems and named the county of Vetra. This made her even more afraid. What she heard scared the heroine greatly. She knew what terrible consequences there were for her family when such things happened to them. His Majesty declared that the conversation on this topic was over. Then he inquired what the doctor planned to do in the near future, expecting a quick answer from him. Everything was said with the same coldness that always accompanies his voice. He looked at the doctor with a cold, almost threatening expression, making it clear that he must leave the room immediately. No explanation, just a clear hint that he had to leave. A little confused, the guy quickly said that he really had urgent matters to attend to and hurried out of the room. He was clearly worried and had no time to waste. The situation required immediate action. He was in such a hurry that he didn't even have time to close the door behind him. When it was left ajar, he shouted that he had important, urgent business to attend to and slipped away as if pursued by some invisible threat. Everything that was happening was so unexpected that they didn't even have time to think about possible side effects. The situation was getting heated, and most likely it was necessary to increase the closeness between them to ensure the desired results. The girl couldn't believe what was happening. Events were happening that she couldn't even imagine. Her brother and son would be arriving soon, and she had to urgently get permission from the Duke, otherwise everything could collapse. Deciding to act without delay, she addressed His Majesty with a request. Her voice was firm despite her inner turmoil. She understood that this moment could be decisive for her further steps. Last time, at the Duke's suggestion, she was already going to invite her friend to the duchy. This issue was important to her, and she hoped that now her request would be heard and the Duke would not refuse her. The Duke looked at her with interest but did not say a word. His silence only increased her tension. She waited for his reaction, afraid that he might refuse, as often happens. A minute later, his face was very close to hers, and he finally said that she could invite as many friends as she wanted. It was an unexpected but encouraging decision that immediately softened the atmosphere. The girl, feeling that she had a chance, involuntarily pulled her little finger. It was something like a symbol of her determination, and perhaps some crazy hope that her request would be fulfilled. She looked at him with tension and asked him to swear on his little finger that none of her guests would be expelled from the castle. It was almost a childish request, but at that moment it seemed extremely important. The Duke did not think long. He swore without hesitation to keep his promise without thinking, since he himself did not consider this moment to have any special significance. She exhaled with relief, feeling the tension leave. She looked at the Duke gratefully and asked again if he had changed anything in his words. After all, the contract needed to be sealed. However, the Duke paid no attention to this. All that occupied him at that moment was her hand, which he held tenderly and then passionately kissed, unable to tear himself away from her touch. He said without the slightest emotion that he had already put a seal, but it was not the seal the girl had spoken of, and all this seemed unimportant to him compared to what was happening between them. Suddenly his face became serious, and he looked at her with such an expression that she immediately felt that the conversation would take a different turn. He was no longer the same person he had been just now. She became wary. Her heart began to beat faster. She couldn't understand what he was planning. His gaze was cold and distant, but at the same time, something in it told her that a surprise was waiting for her. With a completely neutral expression on his face, the Duke, as if on command, asked her to kiss him. It was unexpected and strange, but he spoke so confidently that she could not immediately understand how to react. She, still a little confused, asked again, clarifying what exactly he meant. The Duke, without changing his expression, added that she should kiss him on the forehead. This caused her even more bewilderment. Slowly she leaned against him, feeling his warmth and the silence around her. Until this moment, she had never felt what true happiness was. Even when Her Majesty was not interested in it, she did not know what it was like. But now, at this moment, when her lips touched his forehead, she suddenly realized that for him this was an incredible moment of happiness. It was something important to him, although it did not require words. After the kiss, his face took on a look of satisfaction, as if something had been unlocked within him, and the truth would soon come out. He knew that this was not the end, but only the beginning of something new. He continued to look at her, knowing that he couldn't hide his plans for much longer. However, he believed that perhaps everything would return to normal as it should have been from the very beginning. The girl, still a little stunned, said that there would be no kiss on the lips. After all, she planned to share this moment with the person she truly loved and nothing else. This clearly worried the boy greatly. His face instantly became sad. He could not hide how he was overcome with anxiety and doubt, which of course did not go unnoticed. He immediately understood what the girl meant. She confirmed that the first kiss really should be with the one you love, and in other cases, nothing will work out, just like with the Duke. She added that this moment should be exclusively with the person he loved, and the very thought that he could not do this upset him. He felt a bitterness that he did not expect. He quietly said that he had already made a promise, but she did not understand his words, could not figure out what exactly he meant, and this added even more uncertainty. She looked at him silently with a clear desire to understand what was hidden behind his words. She was in no hurry, but her gaze betrayed confusion and a desire to understand. The doctor, meanwhile, does not leave and simply stands aside, listening attentively to their conversation. He does not interfere, but his eyes are full of concentration, as if he is thinking about something. An interesting thought occurred to him, and this thought made him think. He became more wary, as if something in this conversation might be the key to the solution. He turned his attention again to all the old books he had examined, but he had not found a case like the Duchess's anywhere. She and he, their touch was clearly not normal, and the seal was so unstable. It seemed to him that this was not just a seal, but that he was about to go to Lang for Lucius. This is the place where the ancient sages buried all their secrets. He was sure that something important was hidden there. Only a select few had access to this place. Lang was full of knowledge about anthropes and ancient magic, and perhaps he could unlock some secrets. He felt there might be something valuable there for him. His thoughts were in disarray. He didn't know what to do. There was no clear information yet, but at least he had started to form a plan. It was a vague beginning, but a start. However, the Duke's obsession grew stronger. All his energy was directed towards Astel, and it began to threaten everyone around him. His interest in her became more and more obvious and disturbing. Herzen's doctor could not say for sure whether it was medicine or poison. He was at a loss because the consequences could be completely unpredictable. The only hope was intuition. Meanwhile, the heroine continued her business in Delma village, the central part of the duchy's trading district. It was her usual route, but today it was important to carry out the distribution of the balm. Today's visit was to deliver another batch of balm. It was her responsibility, and she had to do it as accurately as possible. Time was running out, and everything had to be completed. Besides, she hadn't been able to find an appraiser for the artifacts, and this was her chance. Perhaps she would meet him again while the Duke was away. She still had to complete her task. But doubts tormented her soul. She could not get rid of the thought that Aeneas could be the Grey Cardinal. This feeling did not leave her despite all attempts to distract herself. Her anxiety had been growing since she had seen his behavior yesterday. It had seemed strange, suspicious, and it had been bothering her. As events unfolded in Europe, he had quickly intervened. All the Duke's actions were now directed exclusively towards the press. The rest no longer mattered to the county. He concentrated only on this, and all his efforts were reduced to one. A storm raged in her heart. She wanted to believe the Duke, but doubts did not leave her. Could she trust him? She did not know. At some point, she was interrupted by other people who were happy to see her. People asked her with interest how the lady was doing. They tried to find out her opinion and listened to her stories as if expecting something important. She felt like the center of attention. The gentleman also added that after treatment from Mrs. Astle, they no longer experience any pain. She handed them a flyer with a new medicine that promised hair growth. Rumors about it were circulating among the locals. One of the buyers said that this potion would be perfect for trianthropes. He was delighted with its effects. The girl sold batches despite the fact that she herself was completely exhausted from work. At the end of the day, she bought herself some chocolate at her favorite store. It was a small gift to herself for all the hard work and effort she had put into her business. She felt she deserved this little joy. Suddenly, in the midst of the noisy marketplace, she noticed him. Her gaze met his, and he finally paid attention to her. Silently, he looked in her direction, and this was an unexpected moment for her. She stood there at a loss, not knowing what to do. There was a commotion all around, and her attention was completely focused on this moment. Everything that was happening seemed incredible to her. The girls around were delighted, their glances darting between him and themselves. Each of them was sure that it was her glance that he noticed, but the Duke spoke only to her. He asked her why she was still there and what she intended to do next. His question was calm, but with an underlying meaning. The girl felt that this moment was not an accident. After thinking for a moment, she replied that she stayed to earn money. That was her only goal at that moment. But there was a slight confusion in her voice. The Duke was silent for a while, and she could not resist asking him why he was still here, since Anais had promised that he would leave for the capital today. He explained that he didn't want his guests to distribute leaflets, so he decided to come here himself. After these words, he gently kissed her forehead, leaving the girl perplexed. The girls around him became even more delighted. It was a great event for them to see His Majesty addressing one of the common people so personally and closely. He said that when he returned, he would like to know all the details. His voice was confident, but there was a hint of curiosity in it. He seemed focused on this moment. Steele was confused, and her words came out with difficulty. She asked him to return safely, hoping that his words would not remain empty and that he would actually come back. She handed him his favorite chocolate, adding that when he returned he should definitely bring something tasty. This was her request, which she said with a slight smile. Foreign was very surprised by her gesture. It was not just a gift, but a sign of attention. He thanked her, promising that as soon as he returned, he would definitely fulfill her request. As he was about to mount his horse and leave, one of those around him added that he would also buy some chocolate, as if confirming her request and hinting at some small surprise. The main character hoped that His Majesty would just buy her chocolate. She did not expect that her visit would lead to something more, but as it turned out, her expectations were far from simple. Suddenly, she felt a strange excitement. Her heart began to beat again with a rapid and unstable rhythm. She realized that it could be magic, like in those moments when her heart beat in anxiety before. Perhaps the Duke really is hiding his role as the power broker, and that's why his seals are unstable. Every time they part, her heart starts to ache. He looks like a typical handsome villain, perfect for the role of the power broker. Although she didn't want to suspect him, something about his face still made her doubt he was too handsome, and that was dangerous because he could hide not only his appearance but also his hidden intentions. Already on the way home, the girl felt a gaze that seemed to be directed specifically at her. This gaze was so persistent and strange that she felt anxious, but could not understand where it came from. She glanced around the crowd but saw nothing suspicious. Suddenly, the feeling disappeared as if her intuition had failed her, but the feeling of uneasiness remained. The main character headed to her favorite store again. Her thoughts were only about the chocolate cake that she had long wanted to try, but as usual, her path was not so simple. When she entered the store, another man came in with her. He asked her to wrap up the chocolate to take away. It was Mr. Violet, a man with a special presence who attracted the heroine's attention with his unusual behavior. He chose a chocolate with an alcoholic filling and asked to have it wrapped for himself. Behind him was a beautiful bouquet of flowers which he seemed to be preparing to give to someone special. There seemed to be magic between them, elusive and strange. The main character felt it, as if something invisible connected her to this man. Everything was happening too fast, and she did not have enough time to think. She added, however, that she would take the chocolate cake. The man nodded briefly in response, and with that strange exchange of glances, they parted. but the feeling of magic still remained in the air. She left the store, and just a minute later she saw a guy with a bouquet of flowers who was also leaving the store. He was hesitant to give the bouquet because he felt he was not worthy of the girl he wanted to give it to. Because of this feeling of despair, the man lost his balance and fell. He was sure that he had no chance, and his inner world was collapsing right before the eyes of passers-by, especially in front of this girl. Some jewelry started falling out of his pockets. The main character noticed this and hurried to pick it up because it was important, and her curiosity got the better of her. She couldn't ignore such details. When she looked closely at these objects, she realized that they were not just decorations, but artifacts filled with hidden meaning. She felt that these things had some special meaning, but she could not figure out what it was. The man thanked her for her help, and there was gratitude in his voice. He added that if he had more hair on his head, perhaps he could interest her, but now he felt that his chances were slim. Suddenly, all the facts came together. The baldness, both fashionable and natural, and the artifacts. She realized that this was probably an artifact appraiser. She asked him to listen for a while and asked if these were artifacts by chance. Pora replied that this was indeed the case, adding that he had permission since he worked with them. He added that there were no problems with them, but the girl still wasn't entirely sure. But most likely it was an artifact appraiser in front of her. She finally decided to ask about his hair and suggested a quick way to grow it. Perhaps this would interest him. She revealed that there was a healer in the duchy named Ostavali who was known for her unusual hair growth balm, but she decided not to reveal her identity right away. The guy said that he had recently heard about this but thought it was a scam. Most likely it really was an artifact appraiser. Even Cassian couldn't find him. The main character added that if he was interested, he could contact the duchy and find Estelle there. She will give him samples, and after that he will be able to try them. The lady added that the quantity of the product is limited, so it should be picked up as soon as possible. The next day, a raccoon-like Terrianthrope came to Mrs. Astle to evaluate the artifacts. The maid asked what she should do. After thinking for a long time, Estelle said that he could be invited to her room. He was confused because yesterday he said that he would leave everything, but the girl decided not to answer. She handed him a sample and told him to use it. The guy thought that they were trying to trick him after all. After applying a little hair conditioner to his head, he immediately acquired a great head of hair. His delight knew no bounds. He considered this a real revolution in hair care, something that even the Empire's magic could not do. He said he was ready to prepare the money, so he asked for as much of this fund as possible. But the girl said that instead of money, she wanted something else, and the guy didn't know what the lady was going to ask from a raccoon like him. He asked to take at least not a life, but the main character needed to make a contract. It was a special magical contract received from Belle, the heir of the Silver Foxes. It was necessary to ask for an appraisal of the artifact received from the father, but it was important that no one knew about the existence of this agreement. This contract obliged the stopperin to become a slave, and if anyone dared to tell about it, he would burn in fire. This was absolutely necessary because the girl was going to look for the Grey Cardinal. She added that if Mr. Violet did not disclose this, she would provide him with hair growth products for free for 5 years. Although he does not crave fame, he is full of curiosity and passion for artifacts, so he lives a quiet life despite his outstanding abilities. Our heroine had another trump card, a lot of interesting artifacts that could be looked at. To collect such a pile of artifacts, she asked for help from Rudel, who was happy to help her. She was the one who collected all the artifacts that looked bad. He said it was nothing special. The appraiser's answer upset the girl a little, because Rudel had worked hard to prepare all these artifacts. She laid out almost everything, and it didn't work. Suddenly, an interesting book appeared on the guy's review. It was this artifact that seemed very attractive to him. But it was not an artifact, but a girl's diary, and he was surprised because it didn't seem that way. He added that it was this diary that contained a very powerful force. After thinking for a bit, the guy said that he wanted to make a deal. The appraiser took the artifact in his hands and carefully examined it from every side, because at first glance he felt dark energy. Astle asked how long the assessment would take. He replied that it would take about an hour. The girl asked if it was possible to make an assessment right now, but he answered that it was impossible because the master hides his tools. The lady did not understand why, because he usually does not do this. He said he would first go to his workshop and make an assessment there. It should take him less than a week. They shook hands and went their separate ways. As they passed the maids, they lined up and respectfully escorted her to the exit. Now another question was troubling our girl. Namely, was that swordsman hooked on that fishing rod? He was probably informed that the artifact itself had disappeared. She stood waiting, hoping that her plan would work. The chances were pretty high. The maids noticed that someone was constantly watching them. They began to whisper among themselves, and even Sally and Jenny felt it. This started happening recently, and the main character was confused. Suddenly she saw someone's gaze through the door, but she didn't know who it was. He appeared coming out from behind the column. She saw the knight. Just when she was about to catch the swordsman, this knight appeared. Perhaps he appeared in person. The unknown person said that he was pleased to meet her. He was much taller than her. His name was Ritter, and he introduced himself, adding that the knight had entrusted him with escorting our heroine. What she heard surprised the girl. Most likely the Duke ordered it. She stuttered awkwardly and realized that it was not the same swordsman. The knight added that he would be accompanying Lady Astral during this week. He also said that he can be relied upon because he has been helping the Duke for 5 years, and 20 years ago he was recruited to fight monsters in the war. It is also very famous among the people as the sword of justice for criminals. His role is to find and fix problems inside and outside the duchy. While on guard, he has caught many criminals and solved many problems. Although he doesn't carry a poster with his name on it, he is very well known, even if you just look at him. But still, the guy was worried because His Highness the Duke ordered him to keep an eye on Astral somehow with himself. Besides, if his black soul plans something, then the Duke will have no choice but to treat him like a monster. He warned the boy again and told him that he needed to be very careful. The knight understood that the Duke's words were completely serious, and that this meant that if he did wrong, he would be punished as a monster. In the duchy, monsters were mostly castrated, so the boy was even more afraid of such a fate. Astral asked if it was true that the knight had spent 20 years in this castle, but the boy asked to be called by his name. Ritter. The girl decided to shake the guy's hand and said that they would most likely get along very well, while the knight was afraid to even touch her, because if His Highness found out about this, he would end up in the same room with the griffin. He accompanied the lady everywhere as she walked around the duchy court. Meanwhile, she said that as soon as she saw him, she immediately thought he was handsome, adding that she thought he was even more handsome when he walked next to her like that. The young man got nervous and said that he was not attractive at all, but the lady replied that he was very handsome, respectable, and honest, just perfect for her type. Ritter understood why he was sent here because he was the only one who didn't despise Mrs. Astral, and the others were just pretending he thought she would be afraid of him, but she looked beautiful. He was worried about his fate because he knew that if he had dirty thoughts about the lady, he would immediately receive punishment from the Duke. He had to be on guard. Meanwhile, the lady provoked him even more, offering to have tea together. At that moment, he immediately refused. It seems that the guy's sense of guilt has increased greatly. Through manipulation, the girl was still able to invite him to tea, and he agreed. The lady smiled and said that it was time for them to have tea together. Along with the tea, they served a lot of different sweets. The strawberry black tea seemed very tasty to the guy. While Astral was happily drinking tea, the guy could hardly sit still. He agreed with everything the girl said, but in fact, he was very worried about his fate. At one point, the lady asked the guy why he was shaking so much. He couldn't say that he was afraid of the Duke and what he would do to him if the boy behaved badly. He shared his thoughts that he couldn't just sit back and enjoy dessert and tea because knights didn't do that. She left noticing how he was choosing his words for the conversation, not understanding why a guy with such a reputation was saying such things. She asked him if he was comfortable with her, and he became nervous, saying that it wasn't that. At one point, he dropped his cup of tea. It seemed like everything was falling out of the guy's hands. He was very worried. But nothing terrible happened because the maids immediately came and cleaned up the broken cup. She decided to ask something else. She asked if there would be cream at the upcoming fencing competition. The knight did not understand what she was getting at, so he listened carefully with caution. She said that if there were any changes among the knights, or if anyone showed any strange signs, she would like to know about it. She also asked him what he usually did to lighten the mood. He said he punished monsters or caught horrible criminals. He told how he caught a gang of robbers and swindlers, which gave the girl an interesting idea. And it seemed that if he caught thieves, he must have a lot of information about the North, and if he ended up on her side, he would undoubtedly help her. He had a piercing gaze after the girl offered to tell him about the changes among the knights. The main character thought it was a mistake to ask him about this because he might start to suspect her. But the guy thought that the girl was asking him about it because of problems like doping, after which she realized that he didn't suspect anything. Although the lady understood that it had nothing to do with doping, she still confirmed the guy's version. The knight promised that he would watch everyone, and if he noticed anything strange, he would immediately report it. The main character was very happy about this because she almost succeeded. She took the guy by the hand and said that she was very grateful to him, but he said that such thanks were not necessary. It is clear that the guy was only worried about himself because His Highness would incinerate anyone who interfered with him, no matter if it was a person or a monster. The guy stood up from his seat and promised to find out everything as quickly as possible for the girl. Meanwhile, Duke Aeneas visited the capital straight to the Imperial palace. His lordship was very glad to see the Duke. He was also cool and said that he was also glad to see him. The old man asked if anything special or unusual had happened, but Aeneas replied that everything was fine with him. The emperor said that he had adopted a girl. Aeneas didn't yet understand what they were talking about. The real princess of the empire did not even live to see her 5th birthday. It was an incident with kidnapping right in the Imperial palace. They did everything they could, but in the end they could not find the body, and the empress buried the princess in her heart. More than 10 years have passed since that incident, and they decided to adopt a daughter. The Duke decided to congratulate them on this. The emperor refused, saying that the girl was already of marriageable age, and he also added that she was very interested in the North. But Aeneas interrupted the emperor and said that he was not interested in anything related to marriage, so he immediately refused such conversations. The emperor was surprised that the boy didn't even want to think about it. The guy said that the girl was most likely already a Karna living in the capital's imperial family and would probably feel despondent if she began to live among the northern savages. This made the emperor think he had no idea that Aeneas would have such an unwavering will. He was like that from the beginning, but now it feels even stronger. The old man scratched his beard, not knowing what to tell her. He assumed that there was someone he already liked. He also asked if Hertz had any plans since they had to meet in a day. The guy said he was planning to buy a chocolate shop. That surprised him. He didn't look like the kind of person who eats chocolate. Their conversation was interrupted by the butler who told them that Juliana was waiting for him at the palace. The Duke said goodbye, and the emperor wanted to talk face-to-face again at the next meeting. Initially, he wanted Aeneas to have tea with the princess, but judging by his stubbornness, forced meetings will not work. The assistant reported to the emperor that the northern Tarian tropes were growing in strength. He added that even if they were made of monsters, their growing power would pose a threat to the empire. His lordship asked what the advisor proposed. He suggested conducting marriage negotiations. The emperor asked again whether the boy wanted to see the Duke as his son-in-law. He added that marriage negotiations are a very good tool and they need to implement it as soon as possible. There are more and more people in the empire who are heading north, and the number of those who are heading there is increasing, trying to circumvent imperial laws. This information made His Highness think he understood that the Duke was hiding a lot, and besides, the exact number of different thyrranthropes was unknown. Even for a man as powerful as His Highness, looking into Aeneas's eyes makes him feel as if he has encountered a beast with a glint in its eyes. It was acknowledged that this could not continue, otherwise the Duke's influence would get out of the control of their imperial family. Father said the boy was damn right, and before that happened, they had to make sure the Duke was on their side. The principal replied that this was all true. If they did not do this, then at any moment he could become their enemy. Meanwhile, the emperor was walking, and for some unknown reason his cheeks began to burn. It could be due to fatigue or another printing problem. In any case, in the entire imperial palace, he did not see a single one of these people sticking their noses out. Suddenly, he saw the maid with the butler. It must be because of the bad reputation he got during the war with the monsters that everyone fears him. Looking at himself, he increasingly realized that he was similar to people. The sweetest thing about ecofests in the capital is the chocolate mood. It was the leader in chocolate sales. It is so famous that people go there instead of salons. Even today, debuting ladies gather there, and the biggest problem for such young ladies is the escort knights themselves. It seemed that the girls were discussing Cassian among themselves. They did not know whether he had a lover because he was the flower of the entire capital and a public treasure. They were just crazy about this guy. While gossiping among themselves, one of the ladies said that he was a treasure to society and always behaved very gently with girls. The ladies also discussed the recently published issue of Knights and Ladies magazine. It featured an exclusive anonymous interview with a woman who told of an unforgettable night with Cassian. The ladies were either crazy about him. One of them said the guy was simply amazing. They literally idolized him, worshiping his looks and constantly repeating how amazing he was. The girls even blushed from strong emotions and different imaginations. The next gossip was that the Duke had arrived in the capital. They also know that he most likely came here to get engaged to the princess. She grew up and was born into the Count family. The new princess became the daughter of the Imperial family. She pretended to be a princess from a village girl in one day. At first, everyone despised her and called her a country bumpkin with a vacunto, but now that everyone had seen her during her debut, no one dared to treat her with contempt anymore. She looked simply incredible. She was so beautiful that it seemed like flowers were falling around her wherever she went. Her every move sparkled. A princess with such dignity and beauty is a strong, beautiful duchess. She is a very good match. The girls began to dream again and say that the young princess would again get the best of everything. Suddenly one of them became deeply thoughtful. She was shocked. It seemed she saw the Duke. They even stopped eating and listened, turning towards His Majesty. It was him. He was so handsome and incredible that the girls caught their breath. They gasped in unison when they saw him. It was indeed the Duke. They were not at all puzzled by what he was doing there, but he said that he had come here to sign a contract to purchase the cafe. The owner of this establishment was shocked by such a statement because she had no intention of selling this place. She immediately took out the papers, and he said that the buyer's name should be written down to Master Evan. This is the name of his assistant. The former owner of the chocolate shop suggested that he try something. From the taste of the sweet product, he realized that his beloved liked it. Even though he doesn't like sweets, it's still not bad if Steele likes it. He thanked the girl and said that he was returning to the north, and she would go with him. He also added that on the day of departure it would be better if the lady prepared chocolate. The young lady replied that she remembered everything and would definitely prepare it. Meanwhile, the resting noble ladies simply stood there stunned by the grandeur of His Majesty. They became even more shy when he looked at them. Most likely she is the same age, thought His Majesty Anais. They all wore white hair ornaments. He didn't understand what kind of hairpins they were. Out of curiosity, he approached the girls, and they became very scared. He also noticed that they had a journal open with a page about Cassian Grey. He asked what it meant that Cassian Grey's energy is not exhausted. Now he realized that the guy was literally the flower of the Empire. Meanwhile, the girls were very worried, not knowing what the Duke would do with them. Reading the magazine. His Majesty was shocked by how much his incomparability was praised there. What made him angry was that his friend was such a hot lover. He decided to take this magazine with him. The ladies were crazy about the guy. They could not say anything except nod to him. The next day, the meeting at the Imperial Palace began. The war with monsters was on the agenda, after which they decided to finish this issue. The next topic announced was budget cuts for the magic tower in the western part of the Empire. Everyone started discussing it. A verbal altercation ensued, and everyone came to the agreement that it was necessary to cut costs because it was impossible to allow that. The village of the magician grew even more, or the same situation happened as with the magicians of Vietri. The greatest noble family of mages in the empire decided to betray the county of Vetra. They did not know whether it was a manifestation of a feeling of inferiority towards the chosen ones who had strong ties to the common people, or anger towards those who tried to return the empire to chaos. But as an example of what happens to traitors, their heads were hung on the wall, and the distinguished family of magicians instantly became the object of ridicule. The guy advocated for an even greater reduction in the budget because a reaction was expected from the magic tower. They could not be allowed to plot treason like in the wind. The Duke listened to all this without showing it. The only thoughts in his head were about Cassian Grey. He was worried about all those headlines in the magazine. about him being the flower of the empire who melted all the women's hearts, and about the fact that girls were studying him so much. Everyone present in the hall noticed this. Suddenly, Ropa Shelland, commander of the Red Rose, approached the Duke. Anais didn't even pay attention to him, ignored him, and he didn't have time to say anything. Then he shouted that the strength of the knights needed to be carefully tested for the war with the monsters, after which the Duke stopped. He seemed to be quite angry and cold. However, no matter how much the Duke had previously treated them with the respectful, arrogant gaze of a trianthrope of the Empire, he was still not completely independent. He had to show that he was trying to please the Emperor. First of all, in the knightly squad, there was that very man, Cassian Grey. His Majesty asked if that guy would be there. But the commander replied that Cassian had taken a short leave, that he was generally in good health but had not been feeling well lately. The Duke suggested that he retire completely if his health was so bad, but the commander said that was not the issue. In fact, it was not a health problem, but he had personal family circumstances. The Duke listened carefully. Meanwhile, the man in the cloak turned to Astel and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. It was Cassian Grey. He came to see his sister. The girl was excited, but at the same time very happy to see him. Suddenly she noticed a parrot. Cassian had a parrot in his hands that was acting very strangely, and she didn't understand what it meant. He decided to turn to the girl. The guy showed the parrot, and a moment later someone sparkled. Exactly 2 seconds later, a child appeared in the guy's arms, and the girl didn't understand what was happening. The brother said that this child was his son. Now everything came together in the girl's head. This child was her brother's son and precious nephew. The baby looked very handsome, and the lady greeted him immediately. She immediately wanted to take him in her arms, and her brother said that his child's condition was very deplorable. It was obvious how desperately he tried to save the baby because it was his son. It was true, because the magical power was stirring his heart, and if they had delayed a little longer, the baby would have been in danger. The girl also asked if her brother had chosen a name for the child, but he replied that he had not, and that she could name him whatever she wanted. The girl fell silent because she did not know what name to give the baby. That is, unfortunately, Cassian was ready for his death, so he did not give the child a name right away. If Cassian names him, it will be like a testament before death, the first and last time. Our heroine swore to protect this child. As she was leaving, she asked her brother to take care of himself. He hugged her because he hadn't seen his sister for a long time and wished her luck, saying that he would definitely pick them up. She picked up the child in her arms, saying that his mother had abandoned him. It's amazing because he can already talk normally. If he starts talking, it will be even cuter. She wanted to teach him to speak as quickly as possible, and he also needed to be given medicine so that he would grow up healthy. Everyone around turned their attention to the lady. She showed them the child. Jenny and Sally immediately asked who the child was, and the girl said that it was her friend's son because he had urgent business, and the child was sick, so he asked her to take care of him for a while. The baby looked really cute. Sally asked if the child was very ill, and the lady replied that he was a little ill. Miss Rudy looked displeased and asked if His Majesty knew the truth. The woman looked intently at our heroine, and she said that she tried to convey the information to him, but he never found out the details. The main character promised that she would officially declare the child to the Duke as soon as he returned. She did tell him about her friend, but he couldn't have imagined that it would be a child. The girl hoped that the Duke would understand her. Meanwhile, in the castle, the housekeepers were whispering, believing that this was a friend's child, because he looked very much like Madame Astel. Most likely the girl was confused when she encountered them, which is why she said this version. Sally and Jenny whispered to each other they didn't know all the details about this child, and they were very interested. Meanwhile, Miss Rudy couldn't collect her thoughts because if this was Madame Astel's child, then a bloody massacre could begin in the mansion. That same day at dawn, the Grey Cardinal appeared recognizable by the characteristic scar under his eye. He asked his subordinate where the artifact had disappeared. It was Sam's artifact, and it was very important to him. The vice tape also involved the same girl, and she is definitely connected to his artifact. He ordered to find the artifact because if it was analyzed, their identities could be revealed. It was necessary to block their path to the great monarch. He added that if they were crushed, everything would end. Meanwhile, our heroine looked after the child, taught him different words. She didn't want the boy to start saying the word carriage, but she couldn't do anything because he kept repeating the word mom. However, he could already pronounce the word mama quite well, and perhaps he would be able to say dada as well. A moment later, the baby said the word daddy, and the lady promised that until his father returned, she would tell him everything about him, because she couldn't let the boy think that his father had abandoned him. She added that his father would definitely come back to pick him up. She showed a card with a picture of Cassian's uniform and added that he has a very handsome and cool dad. She clarified that these were the exact clothes he was wearing and asked if he was cool. The boy answered yes with joy in his eyes. From then on, he constantly turned over cards with different images of his father's clothes. This touched her. She watched him with delight because she had just told him about it, and he had already repeated, clothes. Looking at the child, she didn't know how to react. It turned out that her brother's son was a genius. Suddenly, she felt a gaze from outside and came closer. Opening the window, she saw a squirrel. She greeted her and asked if she wanted an acorn. But before she could say a word, the squirrel disappeared. Perhaps it was a Tyrian trope, the main character thought. Still, it didn't matter because she had a more important task, to look after the child. Meanwhile, Miss Rudel was talking to the knight, who replied that he had asked about her son several times, and the girl said that it was not her son at all. The senior housewife calmed down. At this time, one of the maids picked up the squirrel, and it seemed that she wanted to say something. She looked very unwell. The girl said that the squirrel told her how the child called Astel Mom, which shocked everyone in the room. The main character felt that the atmosphere in the duchy had become strange these days. Everyone was acting restless. Their looks seemed to want to say something, but no one came near her. Perhaps it just seemed that way to her. But in the meantime, Mr. Ricardo asked who this child was. The baby in Astel's arms immediately greeted the old man. He looked very active, and it was necessary to develop a potion in case he got tired. A moment later, the young man pointed his finger at his grandfather and said, "Meow." Seeing the nails on his grandfather's hands, he thought it was a cat. Most likely it's because jaguars are a member of the cat family, and the boy said, "Meow." Seeing another boy, he asked who it was, and she was surprised because the child knew about cats but knew nothing about foxes. Sally and Jenny brought tea and snacks. Whispering among themselves, they agreed that the boy looked very much like Madame Astel. This seemed strange. It might be because he is her nephew, but in the Empire this hair and eye color is quite common. But still he looks more like his brother than her. The boy kept calling the girl Mom, and as soon as she said that it was not so, he immediately started to act up. Everyone in the hall sat excited. The main character did not understand what was happening to them. Everyone immediately left the room, and Bell dropped his cup and apologized. He realized that this was the perfect opportunity to talk to the child, while the others cleaned up the broken cup. The baby was asked to call him brother. After several attempts, the young man was able to say the word brother. Blender asked who raised the baby before he came here, and the boy replied that it was the teacher. So far, there have been more mysteries than explanations. He didn't know if this child was really Astel's son. He didn't know what to do to find out because Astel was still busy. Belle also asked the child if he knew what the word mother meant, and the child replied that it was the one who gave birth to and raised the child. After this, the little fox asked again who his mother was, and he confidently answered that Mom is Steel. What he heard surprised Belle, and he asked again if the baby was talking about the same Astel. After confirmation, the boy asked who his dad was, and he sadly replied that his dad was gone. He added that he abandoned him. In that case, this child was the son of the one who left him and the father abandoned them. The young man thought he was a scoundrel, after which she came up to them and asked if they were having fun. What he heard confused the boy greatly, and he asked if it was really impossible to be kind in this world, which left the girl confused. She asked him what he was talking about, but the young man did not answer. Meanwhile, the Duke was reading a letter addressed to him. It was from a friend of Madame Astel Retro. He had arrived in the duchy. He regrets and reports that some details are still there, but to get more detailed information, he asked to come back and see for himself. His Majesty immediately thought that Astel had spoken of her intentions to invite a friend into the hall, and it seemed that this was that very friend. It wasn't Cassian who was away due to family reasons, and it must have been just Astel's friend, but he still felt a strange feeling inside. He knew it was time to return to the duchy.